across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, happy Christmas. I'm a blast from the past. Kevin, I think, summed that up absolutely correctly. My name is Nick de Bois. I'm here today between 10 and 1 and tomorrow between 4 and 7 and likewise on Christmas Eve. It is a pleasure to have your company. Has much happened in the last year since I've been away? It's a joy to be back. I hope you'll be calling me. I hope you'll be sending me voice messages. 0344 499 1000 is the number. If you can keep the voice messages to less than a minute, we can get as many on as possible. But otherwise, looking forward to chatting, because although it's Christmas, it may well be very soon Christmas, it doesn't stop this very sneaky government demonstrating just how their priorities are definitely not the country's priorities. Why else? We're in a tough place as a country, but why else would Health Secretary Wes Streeting think it's okay to spend his time politicking for the top job? Because even Starmer's own cabinet think he's pretty useless. Is Wes Streeting, who is now promoting himself as the candidate to take over from Prime Minister Starmer, is he the answer to Labour's problems? And more importantly, the country's problems? 0344 499 1000. Now, I have served on a jury. I have not been in the dock, but I have served on a jury, and it was many, many years ago. And I can tell you that it was a huge responsibility having the fate of one person in your hands and those of the hands of my colleagues on the jury. I know if I had been unfortunate enough to be in the dock, and more so if I was innocent, I would want a jury determining my fate. They may not be perfect, but I would take the good sense of 12 fellow citizens over a judge any day. Now, Labour and Justice Secretary David Lammy, yes, him, they disagree. They want to limit the use of juries. I'm speaking to the leading Labour rebel, Carl Turner MP, who's driving the opposition to this from within his own party. 40 MPs have already pledged publicly not to support it. I sense that this may not happen, thanks to the work that someone like Carl Turner is doing. He joins me to talk about that. And you tell me, do you trust a judge? Do you trust a jury more? 0344 499 1000. And the good news, as we enter into the Christmas spirit, if you go down to your pub today, and no, that's not a song I'm planning on singing, there's a very good chance you won't have to put up with your Labour MP, because more and more are being banned to protest against the massive costs and taxes being put on them by the Labour government. One pub in particular, I love this, Rachel Reeves, of course, the Chancellor in her Leeds constituency, the pub has banned her as well. Kate Nichols, the chair of UK Hospitality, will join me to tell you just exactly how bad is it for not just pubs, but hospitalities, cafes, restaurants. Will you only miss them when they've gone? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, the new head of the Equalities Commission, well, she thinks we should stop saying that migration is a threat to Britain, because that dehumanises migrants. But this new leading light appointment of the chair of the Equalities Commission was appointed by Keir Starmer. And yet he's pledged to do everything he can to cut illegal immigration. And he's appointing someone who thinks we should definitely not leave the ECHR, who doesn't think there is any threat to social cohesion in this country, and we are not at risk from the current situation. Well, James Mathewson joins me to discuss this and more across the political spectrum throughout the morning. And yes, I know we have probably the most authoritarian government I can think of, perhaps only capped during wartime, and even then I wonder. But Keir Starmer wants to copy Australia and ban under-16s from social media. And I know social media is a huge problem for our kids. But will banning actually work? Is it what we need to tackle what is, I think, frankly, becoming a scourge and a threat to our young kids, social media? So I'm going to be joined by the amazing Chris McGovern. He's chair of the Campaign for Real Education, to talk to me about that. And I cannot let the first hour go without talking about reform and the Tories. It's been suggested by Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party that come the moment, come the next general election, when Labour will be probably eradicated from the political scene, it might take a coalition between the Reform and Tories. Do you trust a coalition of the Reform and the Tories to deliver the change you want? Or will it be more of same old, same old? 0344 499 1000 to join the conversation. And to kick us off in the first hour, I'm very pleased to welcome Lord Robert Hayward, who is both a Conservative peer and pollster, to cover some of that ground. Lord Hayward, welcome. Very good of you to join us.
Good morning,
and happy
Nick.
Christmas to you.
And to you too. Please call me Robert.
I will indeed, Robert. Thank you very much indeed. So let's talk about this remarkable interview that Wes Streeting has given, wandering through a park, from what I can tell, judging by the pictures. He's got a job on his hands. He's meant to be sorting out the striking doctors, which he's abjectly failed to do. But he's busy talking about his own leadership prospects and talking up his leadership prospects. And his suggestion is, we want to go back into an EU customs union. This is just pure leadership politics, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We are in a position whereby we're only a year and a half in from the last general election, and the Labour government is in full leadership campaign mode. And the comments from Wes Streeting this weekend are absolutely indicative of that. It's not just Wes, it's everybody else. You talk to Labour MPs and inevitably the subject of leadership comes up. Wes knew that when he gave that interview, and his comments fall into that category. It's a leadership statement. It's not a serious discussion about the customs union or anything else.
So tell me, who's his audience here? Because frankly, polling seems to suggest, and I'd love your view on this, that actually more and more people would welcome much closer union, have Brexit regrets. But is he really talking to the public here as a wannabe Prime Minister, or is he talking to a narrow group who might further his interests?
I think there are two different questions there. The first one, the question of Brexit regret. People, there's no question, the polls indicate that people now think that they would be more happy, more people, and I'm not talking about a huge margin, and the polls are unclear on this, but more people do seem to have some form of Brexit regret. That doesn't mean to say that everybody who's got Brexit regret agrees on the solution to that problem. There may be discussions about how you negotiate the current position better, or alternatively, as Wes appeared to be suggesting, you do something somewhat different. The first change we've seen, which is in relation to the exchange of students, was likely to cost £1/3 billion, if I've got my figures correctly remembered, and I think I have. And there was an enormous kickback at that a few days ago. Then on the other side, there is the question of to whom is Wes trying to appeal, and it's a certain group of Labour Party members. And Wes is in an interesting position. He's high profile, got a lot of support, along with Andy Burnham as a potential alternative leader. But Wes also has one major disadvantage. He is a North London white male. The last three leaders of the Labour Party have been North London white males. Now, does that say that this is a party appealing to the nation as a whole? No, it's not. So he's trying to appeal to a broad element of Labour members in and around the country, not just in London.
Listen, I can't let this morning go without talking to you also about these reports on Reform and Conservatives forming a coalition when it matters. So as I get the situation, you're going to have to help me out here, because the deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, Matt Vickers, has kind of said, well, come back and talk to me about a possible coalition with Reform closer to the polls if we, the Tories, don't recover more ground and more popular support as we approach the election. But they are both taking chunks out of each other. Reform, absolutely adamant that the Tories are a bunch of bad guys who should never be trusted. And of course, Kemi Badenoch's absolutely adamant she can go ahead and win an election in her own right. What is happening within CCHQ and the Reform Party? Do you think they are moving towards coalition?
I think you put your finger on it in terms of the use of words kind of and the next general election. There isn't going to be that sort of consideration at this point. Matt was absolutely clear that if we're in a different position in 3 or so years, then let's discuss the politics of 3 or so years time. What's interesting is that there was an opinion poll yesterday which showed that the Tories had made a marked improvement against Reform, narrowest Reform lead, and Reform have had a lead for virtually the whole year in all opinion polls, but the 3% lead published yesterday in the Mail on Sunday was the narrowest of leads. And interestingly enough, last week in a YouGov poll on net favourability, Kemi Badenoch actually overtook Nigel Farage for the first time. So I think what we're seeing is, and we know this, we've just been discussing the Labour side, we're seeing fluid politics, and there's an awful lot of water to go under a bridge before we get to a general election. So we'll be judging what is current politics, which is the improvement in ratings of Kemi and the Tory party, ahead of anything else.
But Robert, what is driving the decline, if you like, in Reform's support as reflected in the opinion polls, I hasten to add?
Yep.
And whilst I can see Kemi's had a pretty reasonable time over the last few weeks, what is driving that change, do you think, in Reform at the moment?
Yes, let's not overstate Reform's decline in the opinion polls or in local government by-elections, which sadly I spend far too much time looking at. Reform are still doing very well in local government by-elections, and they have a clear lead in the vast majority of opinion polls. It's just clearly narrower than it was before, and that is being driven by people particularly now having a more clear view of Kemi Badenoch. You said that she's had a good last few weeks, probably started at the Tory party conference at the end of September, early October. The number of people who now have a clear and positive view about her, whereas and this is shown up in all the polls, whereas previously they didn't know her, they had no view about her, they considered her somewhat anemic. And by the way, being leader of the opposition is one of the most difficult jobs in politics. But she's come out fighting, she's come out clearly, not only at the Tory party conference, but on the budget and at Prime Minister's question time. So the slight narrowing, and as I say, I don't want to overstate it, but the narrowing is more driven by the perception in relation to Kemi than anything else.
Well, that's interesting. But if you look at, let's say that there is at the moment a bit of a glass ceiling for Reform, that I think the best they polled is 30%, which is huge, by the way, and gives them a great confidence and platform to work with. And the Tories may be around 20, there or thereabouts. I've seen anywhere between 18 and 22, frankly, in recent polls. That is pointing to there's going to have to be a coalition of some sort, isn't it? I mean, isn't the reality, if they don't work together, Starmer and a coalition of the left, and those crazy Greens in particular, will be foisted on us?
Just clarifying, in fact, Reform have clocked poll ratings of up to 35 in a series, some polls. But you're right, in more recent weeks, it's been down to the 30, 31 level, and the Conservatives might be creeping up to around the 20 level from a 17, 18, 19. But no, I'm sadly old enough to recall the SDP, a party most people will not have recalled or heard of.
Oh, yes.
Getting 50% in the opinion polls in the mid-80s and disappearing by the next election. There is no point in discussing what might or might not happen at a general election in 3 years' time, when, after all said and done, we started the conversation with, will Keir Starmer be leader of the Labour Party in the next few weeks, months?
Do you think he will survive this inevitable challenge?
I think he will face a challenge. It's difficult in the Labour Party in comparison with the Conservatives, but I would be very surprised if there is not major upheavals come post the whatever local elections we have in May.
A quick word, something that's going to help reform, possibly not the Conservatives, is surely the new head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, Mary Ann Stevenson, coming out with her first major intervention and basically saying, we're not going to leave the ECHR, and frankly, picking on migrants and highlighting that you can't control illegal migration is demonising them, and this is wrong. This is a Keir Starmer appointment. This is music to Nigel Farage's ears, isn't it?
It's music to both the Tories and Nigel Farage's ears, there's no question. And by the way, this was a role that I was actually asked if I would consider applying for just over 5 years ago.
And why didn't you?
Because I didn't want the role, which is difficult enough. But the new head is proving that it's going to be a difficult next 5 years for anybody who has a considered view of British society, to start with the statements that she's come out with and is really going to anger a very large part of the British population. I didn't apply for the job because I knew you had to spend your time being unbelievably careful about your phraseology, or else it'll be misinterpreted by one group or another. First major statement from the new head, and she isn't being incredibly careful about the phraseology. And I think it's quite rightly angered an awful lot of people.
And will continue to do so. Thanks for getting us off to a cracking start. Lord Robert Hayward, Tory peer, and pollster joining me there. Coming up, I'm going to be talking about your local pub, and I'm going to be asking you, well, I'd like to know, do you think you'd miss your pub? Would you miss your shops? Would you miss your cafes? Because whilst I think every year I've probably talked about the threat to hospitality, the threat to pubs in particular, the last budget has really crashed a stake through the heart of our community pubs. And Kate Nichols will be joining me. She is chair of the Hospitality UK, and we'll just try and assess just how bad things are. In the meantime, you can join the conversation. The lines have been ringing. I'm going to take your calls as soon as I can. Got some messages in. Merry Christmas and wonderful to hear you back, Nick. Point of order. The Tories during COVID were by far the most authoritarian government in this country's long history. It is vital they never forget. Ash, born and bred in Slough. You're right. When it comes to authoritarian, you're quite right, absolutely. Egged on by the manic Labour Party at the time. I'll read more of your messages as soon as they come in, and don't forget the voicemails. Less than a minute if you can. 0344 499 1000.
UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's great to be back. I've been back 20 minutes and you can't please everybody. So Just Some Jane says, nice to see you back. Hope we see more of you. Mark Lloydell, he says, nice change of tone. Good to see you. And then Mark Challoner says, absolutely abysmal. Well, there you go. You can't please anybody. Now, go down the pub, you guys, and have a drink and cheer up. Huh? Around 200 pubs across the UK, speaking of pubs, have joined a campaign to ban Labour MPs following tax rises, which were announced in the budget. Landlords basically saying they're struggling harder than ever. And this move comes amid calls from pub chiefs for an emergency tax cut. The Sun are running a campaign on it, which means it must be serious, and it's prompting venues to bar politicians from Sir Keir Starmer's party. And I've got to say, there's a delicious irony in this. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, who went round all these pubs before the election, has now been directly affected with her local pub in Leeds, warning she is no longer welcome after an anticipated 2,500 increase in business rates. Now, it's not just about pubs, it's about the wider hospitality sector. The visitor economy in its overall capacity, that's tourism, pubs, hospitality, you name it, is one of the most unfulfilled, it has the most unfulfilled potential to help drive this economy, give life chances, building careers to people, all sorts of things. And of course, it's great for our well-being, all of these things. And yet they are under threat now more than ever before. Joining me is Kate Nichols, Chair of UK Hospitality. I'd just like to find out how bad this is. Kate, welcome.
Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Now, look, Kate, you've got on the one hand, lots of pubs, and I know it's not just about pubs, it'll be, and I'm sure you'll highlight that, but warning of huge rises in tax bills. They've already faced other rises that we can talk about. And on the other hand, you've got the government saying, oh, but we're giving relief, everything's fine. What is happening, and what is the seriousness of what is happening to our industry?
Well, it is really serious, and we are already losing 2 hospitality venues a day. They've shut their doors for good over the course of 2024, so 2025 as well. So we are facing a real challenge here. The reality of the situation is that changes to business rates, that's the tax you pay on the property to occupy the property, are forecast to soar. The Chancellor's budget in November saw bills on average rising by £32,000. That's £32,000 extra tax that our pubs, bars, cafes, restaurants, hotels are all going to have to pay from April next year. And to put that in context, if you've got a £32,000 increase in your tax bill, you're going to have to sell over 20,000 extra pints of beer, extra cups of coffee to be able to cover the cost of that. And with the cost of living crisis going on, we are also seeing customers not coming out and our ability to pass that on in terms of price severely restricted. So it is really an existential threat. You're right, there has been talk many years of the problems that the industry is facing, but I think this is really existential. That's just simply unaffordable increase in taxes, and that's on top of all the taxes that the pubs, bars, restaurants, hotels already face.
Kate, can you give us a sense of how big, we all know our local pub, we all know the local restaurants. How big and significant is this industry to the nation?
It's hugely important. It's a £140 billion industry made up of predominantly of small independent community neighbourhood outlets, as well as big businesses. But 140 billion, that's bigger than aerospace, automotive and pharmaceuticals put together. It employs 3.2 million people. That's twice the size of the City of London and financial services. And more importantly, it generates £54 billion of tax. So that's the police and the security budget that we pay. We are the highest taxed sector of the economy. We fund vital public services, and 75% of any profit that we make goes back to the exchequer. So these are businesses that rely on a high footfall to generate a lot of economic growth, a lot of employment opportunities, vast tax returns for the government, and they are at the heart of our communities socially, culturally. They bring us together, they create spaces that we can socialise with family and friends, they combat loneliness, they contribute charitable returns to their local communities. They're at the heart of our country and they're at the heart of our culture.
Are we part of the problem, the consumer, though, Kate? Are enough of us, not going to the pub, not going to cafes and restaurants? I'm not saying with the dramatic figures you've outlined that's necessarily going to solve it, but are we part of the problem?
Well, I think we do need to remember that we need to support these businesses. If we want our community pub, our independent neighbourhood restaurant, our guest house, if we want them to survive, we are going to have to support them through Christmas and beyond. But ultimately, these are tough choices that the government has made and imposed upon this sector. And the money coming through the front door, we've got good demand. You can see places that are trading profitably and busily, but the money coming through the front door is not enough to cover the cost of doing business and the increase in tax and regulation that we've seen over the last 2 years. And that means a third of them are not making a profit.
So what's the answer, Kate? What are you asking the government to do?
Urgently, they need to think again about the business rates increases. 115% increase in bills, despite all the support that they're giving. 115% increase in bills for hotels, 76% increase for pubs and restaurants. Simply unsustainable. They need to think again. They promised us lower tax bills and a lower tax band. They promised 20p, they delivered 5p. They need to deliver in full the 20p that was promised.
We shall do our best to help get that message out. Kate Nichols, Chair of Hospitality UK, thanks for joining us. Tell me, what do you think? Do you use your pubs and cafes enough? Can you afford to do it? Do you understand the dilemma? And would you miss them if they were not there on your high street, in towns, in villages, in cities? 0344 499 1000. What do you make of the prospects of a reform Conservative coalition? I got to tell you, I think it's going to happen, because otherwise we're going to be doomed back to Starmer. Is that a good thing? Would that promise you the change? And who should be Prime Minister? Could you possibly cope with reform with Nigel Farage not as Prime Minister in a coalition with the Tories? Personally, I don't think he'd wear that. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we're going to be talking about jury trials with a leading Labour campaigner against it, Labour MP Carl Turner, who's frankly leading the rebellion. Join me here, Nick de Bois, on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, have you ever been in the jury? I have. It was an extraordinary experience and quite a responsibility. Have you ever been in the dock? More so, were you innocent? would you accept the idea that a jury would not be judging you and it would be a judge? Nearly 40 Labour MPs have warned the Prime Minister they're not prepared to support proposals to limit jury trials in England and Wales. Now, they've had a letter. That letter was organised by, well, I think he organised it, Carl Turner MP for Hull East, who himself is from the legal profession, a barrister, I believe. Carl, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Nick.
Look, Carl, thanks for joining us. I'm really slightly fearful that whilst this issue I regard as probably one of the single most important issues of the day, there will be a lot of people, a bit like, funny enough, social care. If you haven't experienced some of the problems, you don't really follow or necessarily click what is going on here. Just tell me, in your own words, why it is so important to you that we do not abandon jury trials for quite a large number of potential prosecutions.
Well, Nick, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think until people experience the criminal justice system for themselves, whether it's a member of the family who's charged with a serious offence, or whether it's somebody they know, or whether they've sat on a jury as a member of the public determining whether somebody's innocent or guilty. Unless you've experienced, you don't really have a proper grip. But look, the reality is this. I don't think this is popular with the public. I believe the Scottish consulted on reducing the number of jury trials, and the respondents to that survey was hugely against this idea, because when people do have the opportunity to think about it, they realise that it's something that they can do as a member of the community. It's an ordinary member of the public who is serving the community in which they live, and they feel that sense of pride doing something for the country.
So the government will say, David Lammy, your colleague, the Justice Secretary, he will say, look, we got such a backlog, victims aren't getting justice, and the way to do that is speed up the whole process, and cutting out jury trials is the right way to go. Isn't it true that whatever the reservations you and others may have, that many of our European contemporary countries don't have as many jury trials? In fact, the French reserve them for very special cases. I don't think the Dutch have them even at all. You know, what would you say to that charge?
No, that's right, Nick. There's no question about that. But the problem they have in explaining that away is the French and the European system in the main is inquisitorial. It's a very different system.
What does that mean, briefly?
Well, what it means is the judge in the case will make his or her own inquiries. So if there's a case, it's prosecution versus the defence lawyers, it's very adversarial. The judge might stop you occasionally to say, well, you've made your point, Mr. Turner, move on now. But the judge doesn't then become involved in the cross-examination, doesn't try to get the witness back to the position that the judge thinks the witness ought to be in. That's a very different system. It's more relaxed, it's more informal, it's inquisitorial. Our system is adversarial. It won't work. But when you talk about this backlog argument, this is partly what angers me so much. Leveson doesn't say this will definitely reduce the backlog.
Leveson, you're referring to, just let me clarify, he published a report, didn't he, that did clarify this, that did actually recommend reducing some jury trials, is that correct?
It did indeed, but what Sir Brian doesn't say is that this is a guaranteed fix to reduce backlog. The mischief in this idea is actually about incentivising defendants to plead early. Now, if you want to do that, I'm in favour, but don't do it by doing away with the jury system. If you want to incentivise a defendant to plead early, who, according to David Lammy et al., is playing the system, some of which will be playing the system, the vast majority, in my experience, are not playing the system. They've been advised by the lawyers, they have a defence, and they're advised to challenge the accusation of whatever crime it is before a jury of 12 good men, women, and true. And that's their right. So it's an incentive to plead early, because what Leveson argues and what Lammy is now adopting as an argument is if a defendant is waiting 15 months to have a trial before a jury and a judge, that 15-month wait is likely to be more like 15 weeks in the new tier of CCCD court in front of a single judge. But actually, we don't know that's a guarantee. And even if it was a guarantee, David argues that only 3% ever go to a jury trial. In his evidence to the Justice Select Committee last week, he said it's going to affect a quarter of a percentage point, and then says, well, it'll be half.
But then it's ineffective. It's not going to do what he wants it to say on the tin. You're not going to reduce the backlog.
It's just not going to achieve what he's saying it will achieve on the tin. And my suspicion is this isn't about the backlog. Don't forget, this is not going to be retrospective legislation. So the 80,000 that are backed up in the Crown Courts at the minute isn't going to be affected one iota. The 350,000 in the magistrates isn't going to be affected. It's just going to go up, in my view. But he goes a lot further than Sir Brian Leveson, because he also talks about up to 24-month sentencing powers in the magistrates, and indeed refusing to allow them to appeal sentence or conviction without permission to appeal, which I think is a disaster, and I think it will cause more people to go to prison. The prison population is already bursting at the seams with something like 88,000 with a capacity of 89,000. This is a mistake. He must stop. There's enough Labour MPs who are saying to me, subsequent to the letter going to the PM.
OK, so the whips, there was a rule of thumb in those distant days when I was an MP a long time ago. That if
you were a very good MP, Nick, by the way. You had an ability, I think, to be... disagree in a way which was always very polite.
Disagree agreeably. Well, that's okay. Let's give Carl another half hour on air, shall we? I think that was it. Carl, but going to a serious point, there used to be a rule of thumb, because I played my part in some rebellions, that if the whips knew that there were like 20 potential rebels who've announced publicly they're going to rebel, that probably meant there were 40 potentially or 50. Have you got enough MPs to either force David Lammy to climb down before he brings this in legislation, or will it go to the wire and go to legislation?
I've told the Prime Minister directly that this won't get through, and I'm confident. What I've asked the Prime Minister to reflect on is, in the 15 years I've been a Labour Member of Parliament, I've never once, not once, voted against the whip. I've got members of Parliament who are coming to me who are currently either PPSs, parliamentary private secretaries, on the first rung of the ladder of government, and some, not many, but some ministers coming to me and saying, this is not a good idea. We need to stop it happening. Now that, I think, suggests there are enough. I think when you get to the point of 40, there's safety in numbers. The Chief Whip can't suspend 40 MPs. Before you know where you are, there's 60, 70, 80, the number builds. And when you get to that point, that critical point of 80, which is the half of the majority we have, I think the working majority is 160, then, of course, if you do suspend all of those MPs, you've effectively created two parliamentary Labour parties. OK,
final question for you, and I'm linking two stories here, and we did give you the heads up. Will it be easier to stop these proposals going through if Wes Streeting, who's basically publicly declared he's against a cabinet policy on customs union, he's rebelling, he's setting out his stall to be a leader. If Wes Streeting's your Prime Minister, would it be easier to stop these proposals?
I'm not sure, Nick, that Wes is actually setting out his stall. People suggest he is, but I texted him last night, in fact. I hope he's hearing the programme, because I texted him asking if I could have a cup of tea with him after the Christmas recess. He wasn't responding to me immediately. He's probably read it. I don't think he is trying to lobby support to be the leader against Keir. I think the truth is, honestly, we all want Keir Starmer's government to succeed. Me as well. I was a big supporter of Keir. I know how excellent he is. I truly do. I had the opportunity to speak with him privately a couple of weeks ago. I'm impressed by his vision for the country, but the truth is we need to get the message out better.
Carl.
And unfortunately, we're struggling with that.
Carl, no one knows his vision. The problem is he's not a vision. He's literally a bank manager stewarding the slow, gentle decline of this country, which, by the way, some of my leaders did as well.
This I don't deny, Nick. I don't deny that we have a problem with getting the message out. But I think Keir does have a vision. He's very convincing when you speak with him privately. He's determined to serve the country and serve the public in a way that changes their lives for the better. I think we all know that in the Parliamentary Labour Party. And frankly, I think a contest at any point would be a bad idea.
But is this helpful to Keir Starmer, what you're doing?
Well, look, I'm not here to help Keir Starmer. I spoke to Keir prior to doing this stuff and said to him, think again. But if you don't think again, I'm sorry, I've got to draw a line somewhere, and this is the line for me. So I've been up front with the Prime Minister. I've been up front with the whips. I'm not doing it to be awkward. This is not a sort of an opportunity to kick the government because we think the government's unpopular, which it clearly is. I mean, the reality is, this government is unpopular. I don't know we've arrived at this situation 15 months into a government, but I think some of the policy decisions we've made at the early parts have been bad ones, and it's made the public not trust us.
Do you know,
we need to win back that trust.
It is quite extraordinary, because I posted a tweet a long time ago, well, not that long ago, when Carl was doing this. I said, if the Labour Party cannot secure the support of people like Carl Turner MP, then they're doing something drastically wrong. Carl, you've set out your case very fairly. I'm dying to hear what our listeners and viewers think about it. Thanks very much. And frankly, I'm going to be very partisan. Good luck. This is a huge threat to our country. It's over-authoritarian and our liberty is at stake. Carl Turner, MP for Harleys, happy Christmas. What do you make of that? Are you happy to see jury trials go in the planned or perceived interest of speeding up the backlog, which Carl has made perfectly clear is not going to happen? Do you care? Or do you think this is a big affront to our liberty? 0344 499 1000. Use that number. Your calls are coming up next. I'm looking forward to taking them, reading out some of these messages. Join me, Nick de Bois, here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just before we go to calls, Nick, this is Tim in Suffolk. A few messages to get through here. Your own guest a few days ago said the real reason for the backlog is purely financial. They don't want to repair courts or have them sit more often. Money, always follow the money, Tim, absolutely. Nick, good morning. As a Reform member, I do not want a coalition with the Conservatives after the last time when they promised Nigel a deal before an election and then stitched him up. You're referring to 2019, where Reform stood down and then we had shall we say, not the best delivery of Brexit we could have had. However, I would support a relationship between them, which means they come together on voting, and the party that had the most seats had their leader as PM, Rod Essex. That's basically coalition. Morning, Nick. Anyone who sanctions experiments on children, as Wes Streeting has done, is not fit to be our PM. That's apart from the fact that he is guilty of Labour's hobby horse of hate speech and inciting violence when he said he would happily shove Jan Moore in front of a train. It is impossible that this dangerous and deeply unpleasant man could be in number 10, Susan says. Morning, Nick. I do not Brexit at all. I think did not vote Brexit at all. I do not regret Brexit at all. What I do regret was the idiots who negotiated it, as there's a story behind that, but I think I'll save that for later. As for Reform Conservatives, if they both sing the same song, fine. What I'd really like is manifestos to be legally binding. That would be interesting talk. Nick, nice to see you back. No Brexit regret on my part. The EU is dying. My main point is that Labour just don't understand the country. It doesn't matter who is leader. Socialism destroys the country and doesn't benefit the people. Only the elite, says Natasha. Thank you for your calls. Thank you for your messages. Let's go to some calls. Cindy in Michigan. Hello, Cindy.
Nick, hi. It's so nice to see you again.
You're always so cheerful, Cindy.
You've been missed. You've been missed like crazy.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you're back.
Great. And that's good to hear. What would you like to talk about?
I'd like to talk about juries. You know, Here in America, it's in our Sixth Amendment. We are guaranteed a right to a jury trial. Now, I wish that you had that because your judges are far too woke. This is dangerous for you.
So do you see judges effectively in criminal cases leaning too heavily towards defendants, perhaps regardless of facts? Is that what you think?
I've heard it time and time again here on Talk with lenient judges for residing over cases.
Like tribunals as well is what many people will point to, work tribunals particularly. Cindy, let me ask you this. You see, the difference between us and European systems, because lots of European systems don't have jury trials, but the judge is very much an investigator rather than sitting there meant to be impartial. You see, I probably come to the defence of some judges and say the majority of them, I think, are impartial, listen to the facts, we often only get the headlines, and they're worth keeping. But if they start to have to listen to the case, intervene on the case and make a decision, isn't losing their impartiality and respecting the actual law, which is their job, to keep the court case following the law and focused on the law, isn't that a good thing, even though you may be worried they're too woke?
Well, leaving it up to one person is always it's that could be a little bit tricky here. You know, at least when you have a jury, you have 12 people of your peers.
Have you ever served on a jury?
And a judge is... sorry?
Sorry to interrupt you, but have you ever served on a jury?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I have not. I've gone to try. I've never been picked, but I've almost.
Would you like
a couple
to?
Times, almost. I would.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. I mean, it's quite a responsibility when you realise that if you think they're guilty, they're going to jail. So you do think carefully, as a juror.
Yeah, you have to, and you can't put all your eggs in one basket, in one person's basket. That person that you're thinking is meant to be impartial. That's not always going to be the case.
What do you think of your judges in America? Do you think that they're pretty good? Do they? I mean, our judges get a lot of tabloid criticism if a case that's been considered, as you say, woke, or the sentence is far too lenient. They get a real hard time. What do people think generally of judges in the U.S. system?
I think it's pretty split down the middle. You know, like as I'm sure you've heard in the news, Trump has been blocked by some of our woke judges, and some of the things that he's tried to impose, he's been blocked a lot. So we have some woke judges here too as well. We have some pretty good judges as well, but we do have our fair share of woke.
Cindy?
And I hate to criticize your judges.
That's okay.
I'm sure you have some lovely, lovely judges. I'm sure that you have them. But I've heard of some trials that you've had and where some migrants have got off the hook.
Well, they are generally what we call immigration hearing tribunals, and they make some appalling decisions.
Like the chicken nugget.
Yes.
A case, I'm sure you've heard of that one.
Well, let me explain for those that haven't. This is someone who was granted the right to remain in the country on the grounds that they'd suffer without chicken nuggets, and it's open to ridicule, and we have many. Cindy, lovely to hear from you. I'm going to get on, take more calls. It's great to be back. That was Cindy in Michigan. Let's go to Ashley in London. Ashley, hello.
Yeah, morning, Nick.
Good morning.
I am a constituent of West Streeting.
Right, North East London.
So
yes.
I see him. Yeah, I see him quite regularly. He's really about. He's actually, to be fair to him, he's actually a decent chap. I mean, I voted for him this year because I had to, because it was the only way to keep the opposition in the era out.
And he only just got in, didn't he?
Yeah, it's about 500 and quite scary. It was all on Gaza and that was it. And so he is a person I'm fine with. I just think that, he needs to concentrate more on the fact of dealing the job he actually has.
The day job. This is my beef. This is my beef.
And rather than whether he's being planting the seed for here or whether it's a challenge is obviously another question. But the point is, I was a Remainer. Yeah. Right. I wanted to remain. I don't regret what happened. That was my choice, and I just have to accept it. You get on, and we just have businesses and so on to deal with it, which is what we have. My issue here is that I don't want, even as a Remainer, I don't want to start entering into contracts with the EU in bits and pieces, because the thing is like in any form of business, there are consequences to every action. And the reality is that we're doing it now with the education. It's going to cost us £9 billion. Just like that, we found £9 billion.
Are you talking about the right for the right for European students to come to our universities and vice versa? And we are paying shed loads of money for that privilege.
We're paying £9 billion. Apparently, from what I understand, we're owed £5 billion.
This is Erasmus.
Yeah. And we were owed $5 billion because more students come here than go over there. So, and the same goes to the customs union. It's whereas I understand the principle of it will make certain businesses easier, the consequences and the cost of it.
It's a terrible idea. The customs union, Ashley, is the worst possible one to do in so many ways. Not least because we would get a worse arrangement than we've got with other countries we've negotiated, for example, America. Listen, Ashley, thank you very much for your call. I wish we'd had more time to talk to Ashley. I did promise voice messages. Let's listen to Kelvin.
Good morning, Nick. West Streeting, he's only in politics for himself. He's got a big head. He's got a big mouth as well, which his head should fit inside and still rattle. It's ridiculous. If he gets in power, it'll be worse than Starmer. And this thing about us going back into the EU and back into, all that lot, doesn't matter what part of the EU you go in, shouldn't we have another referendum on that and ask the people? West Streeting in his comment says he supports the whole of Britain to go back in it. Well, the whole of Britain doesn't support going back in it. Where's he get that from? He's full of BS and he should be kicked out along with this party because they're all full of BS. They're nothing but liars. They lied to get in power. None of this was in the manifesto. And we are being treated like slaves in our country with all the taxation and everything. And we're working to pay for migrants and everybody else in foreign countries. Nothing's being done for this country. Bye.
Mark my words, it will be in the manifesto of the Labour Party to go back into the single market or something similar to that. Let's briefly hear from Jack.
Good morning, Nick. Great show as usual. Ignore the predictions, ignore the polls. Listen to the silent majority. Nigel Farage and co will get 500 plus seats in the next Parliament. Mark my words, I'm going to have a bet on it. Have a good one. See you later. Bye.
Coming up, I can tell you, in the next hour, it's going to be great. We've got Chris McGovern, Chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, and Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. We're going to be talking about, the madness behind the idea that the new Equalities Chief says that we don't come out of the EHRC. We shouldn't demonise migrants. And on the other hand, you can read today about an Albanian kingpin. What is a kingpin? A king who is smuggling migrant crooks out of the UK so they don't face trial. Well, I don't know why he bothers, to be honest. He's not going to actually get a trial for a very long time. He was here. And Keir Starmer wants to ban social media for under 16s. I can understand why you need to control it, but how on earth would a ban work? I don't quite see how that is going to happen. And should we carry on banning things the way we're doing? Join me, 0344 499 1000, or send me a voice message. Good to hear from you always.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining me that first hour. Let's get into the second. I'm Nick de Bois, sitting in for Julia Hartley-Brewer, of course, and it's great to be back. Let's just read a few messages. Good morning. Jury trial changes are nothing to do with justice or backlogs and is simply one more little steps towards becoming a complete dictatorship. Nick, Ian from Merseyside here. Let's trim the political system. If a sitting MP changes party, then there is an immediate by-election. If government changes their leader, then an immediate general election. I'm sick of all the jam tomorrow promises to get to power. Can someone please remind the socialist morons on the left that more people didn't want this government than did? They act like this is what everyone in the country wants, and it's a lie. And this one on Reform Tory partnership, which I'm going to pick up in a minute. I'm OK with Tories joining Reform to make sure no other parties get in, but as long as all the Tory MPs who join them agree they honestly count. Not quite sure what you meant with that last sentence, Mike, but isn't it interesting? I reckon if I'd asked this question 6 months ago, maybe 9 months ago, I would not have had a Reform member contacting me, even suggesting that actually a coalition makes sense. Time changes, and the polls change, of course. Now, joining me for a review of some of the key political topics today, I'm very pleased to welcome James Heal, Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator, youngest political commentator as far as I can tell. James, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you, Nick. Not too bad.
Yeah, he's young and well-informed. I was the future once, but it was many decades ago. Good to have you. Listen, I really want to kick off, if I may, talking about Wes Streeting from two things. He's basically articulating, although we had Carl Turner on, the rebel Labour MP, when it comes to jury trials, saying he doesn't agree that Wes Streeting was setting out his stall to be leader. But Wes Streeting takes time out to go for a walk in a wood and tell us, or tell someone through the papers, that he thinks joining the customs union is a good idea. Well, on both counts, is the customs union joining it a good idea for Britain? And is this Wes Streeting setting out his stall to be leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister?
I think that it would be a very difficult step for the UK. It's you could, depending on where you stand or whether it be a good thing or not, is up to you. But I would make the point that if we did join the customs union, the Labour Party would have to give up those trade deals, which Rachel Reeves loves talking about, with India and the US. It would also take many, many years. And in terms of the UK, in some ways, we're irrelevant because I'm not sure the Europeans would let us back in. You know, you listen to what the continental sort of diplomats are saying, you read the press, and they're saying, hang on a sec, for 40 years, Britain was a half-in, half-out member. We then spent 4 or 5 years of their bandwidth obsessing about Brexit, and now we want to get back to with them.
But actually, James, isn't being in the customs union literally actually 1 foot in and 3 foot out, because you're a rule taker, you have to give up your trade deals. And actually, you don't really, you might get more frictionless trade, but it's highly questionable how effective that would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, massively. And I think that's why, the UK has lots of strong arguments against us going back in. But also, I'm just saying that the Europeans wouldn't want us necessarily to go in because they can see the polls. They can see that on current trends, Reform is set to be the next government. And I think they would be very sceptical about having us back in only to sort of pull out in a few years' time. So I think on the customs union point, I think it's very debatable. I think it's really just a sort of talking point for the Labour activists, and that leads to the second point, which is why Wes Streeting is floating this. Now, talking to members of the shadow cabinet, their big debate is whether this is just a rhetorical device, this pro-Europe talk, or whether actually Labour does want to get closer to Europe. I think it's a bit of both, but I think on the customs union point, it's more Wes Streeting going out there and flexing his muscles rather than actually sort of a realistic thing that the government's going to do next year.
I mean, I'm weirdly often quite impressed with Wes Streeting's ability to say things no one else really in the Labour Party will say. He does, I think, articulate really well. I think, and despite that, as a health secretary, it's far too early to say if his reforms are being successful, but he's failed completely when it comes to sorting out the doctors' strikes. Is Wes Streeting the answer to Labour's problems, and should he become the next leader?
Within Labour, there's a big divide. There are those who think their problems are about policy and those who think it's about comms. If you think it's a comms problem, Wes Streeting is probably your man. As you say there, Nick, he is the best communicator, in my opinion, in the cabinet. He is someone who is slick, funny, knows his lines, knows his brief. And I think that's why he's able to get away with that kind of cheeky chapping sort of persona that he's perfected in many, many years. So I think that he has got lots of allure and talent. But the question is, would the party go for it? And a bit like the Tories often go for a leader who's slightly right at the current one and the current centre, I think Labour would want someone who commercially is on the left slightly more than Keir Starmer.
So that's not a ringing endorsement that he would win it, but do you think, a final question on this point, that we are going to have a leadership challenge and probably a leadership change in the Labour Party? Can they defenestrate a leader as effectively as the Tories do?
No, they can't as effectively institutionally, but, you know, we've never seen a Labour Party come third in Wales. We've never seen a Labour Party come really sort of third in Scotland after the way they've been polling. We are in unprecedented times, so I think unprecedented measures, such as potentially a secret ballot, are definitely under consideration in the PLP, and I think it's 50-50 whether Keir Starmer makes it through this year or not.
Well, I will have to ask our listeners and viewers, do they think Wes Streeting is the answer to Labour's problems, if not the country's problems? They can join our conversation here, 03444 991 1000. Let's move on, if I may. I think it's all a bit weird, actually, this. So, on the one hand, we have got the new head of the of the Equalities Commission, basically saying, setting out a stall where she says we shouldn't leave the European Convention on Human Rights, and by the way, stop demonising migrants because they're really good for the country, and the idea that you might speak up, and I'm paraphrasing here, and worry about social cohesion, worry about your safety, is actually not a good thing. In the same day, I'm reading there's an Albanian kingpin who is smuggling migrant crooks out of the UK in lorries for 2,500 people to help them avoid being put behind bars where they belong. I mean, it's a bit screwed up, but what is she playing at here? This is Starmer's appointment. Isn't he meant to be getting tough on immigration and illegal migrants?
Well, quite. And I think this is smacks of a general fighting the last war. This person's talking points are straight out of the book from 10 years ago, when we were in a very different place regarding migration, both legal and illegal. And it just strikes me that she is going to immediately come into office and have burnt any kind of goodwill with a lot of people who are sceptical of migration. I think that the tone struck by Shabana Mahmood, the new Home Secretary, was much better judge, saying migration can be a good thing, but it has to be done in a proportionate and legal way. And as you say, Nick, some of the stories coming out of the paper today and in recent weeks or so do point to the fact that actually migration, if done in the wrong way, a legal way, can be a threat to this country and to its people.
And maybe this this new chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, her name's Mary Ann Stevenson. Maybe it speaks to some of the frustration that we are led to believe the cabinet have with the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, because this is his appointment. She's completely off message when it comes to actually trying to back up what his own Home Secretary is trying to do. I mean, are there cabinet, you're in the know, are there cabinet ministers who are banging their head against the desk going, you know, will no one rid us of this fool of a Prime Minister who is just undermining us at every step? I mean, is it like that or not?
I would say two things, one of which is I haven't spoken to any ministers about this specific appointment, but this is emblematic of frustrations I have heard, which people saying to me, they just don't get it. The Whitehall blob, a lot of the people who've been around these appointments just do not get it and are currently acting like this is still 2011, 2012 rather than 2025, and the world's moved on. Second point, Keir Starmer, he does have a lot of blind spots. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, I'm getting ahead of myself, but this is a gift for Nigel Farage and reform, isn't it? When one of Starmer's appointments comes out and says these things, as you've brilliantly put, James, you know, that she's behind the curve. This is just Nigel Farage just points and see, they're not serious about stopping it in the Labour Party, and by the way, the Tories failed when they were in power. It's got to be a gift for him, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and this is what Farage is very good at, which is just saying he praises those who say the right things, saying Shabana Mahmood should join the Reform Party, etc. And then he waits for parties' internal contradictions to bog them down. And so talking a good game, but then he'll point to something like this and say, look, the true face of the Labour Party, this is what the person is actually in charge. And I think, Nick, you and I both know how important these triangles can be in terms of the kind of setting the playbook and rule book for government in the next few years.
Should there be a coalition? Should there and will there be a coalition between the Tories and Reform? All the polls are pointing to the fact that neither is going to form a government. Nigel Farage will probably be the largest party if polls are repeated as they are today. But the left could still outflank the right for power if the Tories and Reform don't agree, surely.
Yeah, in the short to medium term, I can't see any kind of pact or deal. I think both Kemi Badenoch in her leadership and Nigel Farage clearly battling over momentum, want to come out of May larger parties. Get it close to the time, I could see echoes of 2019 playing back. That was when, of course, Brexit Party stood down to make way for the Conservatives to stop Jeremy Corbyn.
And could they really do that again, James? Sorry to interrupt you, but could they do that? They're raw about that, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, I think that I think it's very unlikely. I think there could be some kind of messy compromise, maybe agreed, where, you know, you'd agree to focus resources or something like that. But if truth be told, Nick, I mean, those memories are long. And given how much Nigel Farage has talked about replacing the Conservative Party, I'm not exactly sure why he would withdraw the killer punch when he's got them on the ropes.
So let's just move to one final topic, which I think, again, well, it may be coming up to Christmas, but there's a plethora of important stuff out there. The Liberal Democrats have done something useful, which I find quite interesting. They've commissioned a survey that highlights the shoplifting epidemic. And it's looking like, and this is one of these weird statistics that have come up, more than 800 shoplifting offences a day are going unsolved and are closed without a suspect being identified, according to the figures. I mean, that is huge when it comes to the impact of this on society. I don't know about you, but I've seen it happening myself, and I suspect most people see an instance of shoplifting or what they think may be shoplifting happening. The Liberal Democrats' answer is they want mass CCTV rollout to give businesses the tools they want. Presumably they want us, the taxpayer, to pay for it. And presumably, I'd like to think somewhere in there might be some prosecutions. We're not getting to grips with it, are we?
No, we're not. And you may remember, Nick, in opposition, Labour made a huge fuss about this. They made a lot of kind of similar statistics. In government, it seems that it isn't something that hasn't been so much of a focus. And the tragedy is, I think, that a lot of this is kind of done on a very big scale, where sort of gangs are involved in targeting stuff. This isn't just people running out and nicking a loaf of bread. This is a much more wide, organised and systemic problem. I don't know what the right answer would be. You talk to people like the British Retail Consortium, they'll have a whole set of answers, but really it seems enforcement, not just identifying, but the enforcement of that law is going to be key.
I don't want to take you back, because you were probably, and I say this with tongue in cheek, you were probably still in school at the time, but back in 2012, you may remember, we had the riots. And I was, at the time, the MP for Enfield, which was one of the, it wasn't the worst hit, but it had a rough time, by all means. And people were nicking from the shops, anything from trainers to water. And we ended up with these overnight courts, because Cameron wanted to rush justice through for justice to seem to be done. We ended up sending people to jail for nicking water and trainers. And they were sent to jail. And I went and met with retailers over a year later, I remember, and they were telling me, do you know, there's a real benefit to what happened, is that with those sentences that were handed out, shoplifting is down dramatically in our stores. Now, that was a temporary impact, but is it still old-fashioned to say, if we can sort the justice system, if you steal from someone, from independent traders or larger traders, where you are effectively stealing livelihood, that theft should bang you up, and guess what? People might not like to lose their freedom if they nick water. Is that too old-fashioned? Could I reasonably expect a government to come up with that idea?
I think a government very much could come up with an idea, but not in the current circumstances. They would point to the court's backlog. What I would say, Nick, is, of course, you remember under this government as well, when we had the Southport riots, suddenly it was late-night sittings, it was justice served, you know, over time. The state can respond in an emergency, but currently it's failing in far too many areas. And you're right, I think that, you know, someone used to work in a shop myself, you need the law to be laid down and an example to make, because at the end of the day, it's those that's retailers who pay the price, and consumers in the form of higher prices too.
The thing is, I just feel that there's this resignation. I read there's resignation to levels of crime that have reached an extraordinary level. So I read this report about how many phones are swiped off people in London, particularly, and I now, you know, and they were talking about, this is what you should do to avoid someone stealing your phone. Don't hold it in your hand. Don't walk next to the road. So you get it. And it's like, oh, hang on, okay, that's common sense. But guys, aren't you missing the point here, that these people are thieves and they are literally nicking phones every 8 minutes or something like that? Why have we as a society just tolerated this growth in crime where we're quite accepting of it?
I think it's absolutely frustrating. And, you know, personally, I've had lots of friends who've had phones stolen and they can identify their phone. And they've gone to the Met Police and said, look, My phone is in that building. Please just go knock it down. And then there have been occasions when the Met have investigated such cases and found there were sort of hundreds of phones in there. And it was done, again, on an industrial scale. And I think that is something that needs to be applied here, is that the broken windows theory about actually, if you do have a demonstrable appearance, then I think that actually that will help get some cracked out.
Now, didn't some New York mayor once do that? He said if you deal with the small stuff, you actually can change things, and he did. What was his name now? Was that Rudy Giuliano, I seem to recall?
Yep, and Bill de Blasio. Yep.
Bill de Blasio, yeah. Well, there you go. We can at least talk about him. James, lovely to talk to you again. Thanks very much for joining us here on Talk, covering the political grounds. I mean, we covered an awful lot there. I am genuinely interested in what you think about Wes Streeting taking his eye off the day job, and would he be the answer to the Labour Party's problems, because they're deeply unpopular, but would he be the answer to the country's problems? Because I'm pretty certain we're going to have a new Prime Minister in the next 12 months, and it ain't going to be one that you have voted for. And the Tories and Reform doing a deal, I think the ground has shifted. I think Tory members I think Tory members have always thought doing a deal is quite a good idea, to be honest, because they were in such a desperate state. It seemed a good idea. But Reform, have you moved on that? Do you think it would work? And do you trust the Tories and Reform to deliver the radical change that we need? And most people think that that change doesn't involve Labour, Conservatives, or even Liberal Democrats being back in power again. 0344 499 1000. Thank you for your voice messages as well. Try and keep those to 1 minute, and I will play as many as I can. Again, that number's 0344 499 1000. Coming up, I'm going to dig a little deeper into migration and what this EHRC chief has been saying, and we're going to look at this idea that Keir Starmer, because he can't think of an original idea, can he? He wants to copy Australia and ban social media for 16-year-olds. I kind of get why it's so having such a bad impact on our kids, social media. It really is. And I think if we hear a little bit about that, that'll be quite interesting. But how would a ban work? Could it work? 0344 499 1000. Or you can, of course, follow us on X at talkTV, or me at Nick de Bois.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Nick. As an ex-member of the Conservative Party, Brad says, and now a member of Reform, I'm quite relaxed about a coalition between the two. It could well be the only way to prevent a coalition of the evil left, says Brad. Morning, Nick. Jackie says, I don't understand why Reform voters would have a problem with some form of electoral arrangement with the Conservatives, as long as they are the likes of Rees-Mogg and Jenrick. After all, most Reform voters were at some point Tory voters, and no one says we don't want them because they're ex-Tory, do they? Well, they do, actually. There's been a lot of people who've objected, and the Labour Party are trying to make out, as they would, that Reform are just becoming a bunch of failed Tories, as they put it. So I think, though, on the ground, members are changing their view. I'm going to read this from Sue and then get some voice messages and calls. Hi, Nick. The point about Brexit is that the Conservatives never gave us a proper full Brexit. True. Too many of them were passionate Europhiles and still never accepted Brexit. So our country is still waiting to take full advantage, which we should have started 10 years ago. For example, what happened to the bonfire regulations we were promised? The Brexit we have been given is a fudge, thanks to our utterly inept politicians who profess to know how to run a country. Nobody takes them seriously anymore. It's reform for me, says Sue. Sue, thank you very much for that. I must find time to go into my story, because I worked on Brexit negotiations for 122 days when I worked with Dominic Raab, and then, as you know, he resigned and I went with him at the same time. Let's go to Mark in Lincolnshire. Mark, hello.
Hi there, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Happy Christmas to you, and it's yours to talk.
Happy Christmas, Nick. Yeah, I mean, basically, what I wanted to talk about quickly was, unbelievably, I find myself kind of partially agreeing with Zara Sultana.
Okay, right, now she is as far on the left as you're going to get, so which is fine. So let's hear it.
I'm pretty hard right. Reform don't do it for me. Put it like that, Nick.
Okay.
The reason
why not?
I do that. Well, the reason why I do that is regarding these Palestine Action guys that are on remand at the minute.
Yes. The ones who, some of them are striking, aren't they, and on a food strike and allegedly close to death.
Some are hunger striking, aren't they? Now, as far as the hunger strike stuff is concerned, that's their own fault. You know, they're doing that to themselves at the end of the day. That's kind of virtual signalling to an extent, I think. Mm-hmm. But the actual essence of what Sultana is actually talking about is, she has a point, basically, because we're living with a government that are about as authoritarian as it gets without going full-on communist. They've taken the right to jury trial for most cases. They've taken the automatic right of appeal for most cases. And as Sultan is basically saying in that, we have a system, we have only a handful of things. There's like about 3 things that we've kept from the Magna Carta. Now, they've already got rid of the jury trial one.
Yep.
And they're looking like they're also
Well, they haven't, but they're trying to.
Well, indeed. And I believe there's another one, which is it habeas corpus, is it? Which is, basically you have a right to be tried within 6 months.
Yeah, well, now, that's gone because they just can't get you in front of the courts. But the effect of it,
well, this
yes,
is the thing.
absolutely.
But these Palestine Action guys are looking at remand for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's 4 times the remand limit that's set out.
Yeah, which is a failing for lots of people, not just those people, but it's been highlighted by the Palestine Action people. Yeah.
Which is why I was mentioning it.
Yeah.
Which is why I mentioned Zara Sultana. Because she makes that excellent point, because it's certainly not only these guys that are suffering at this. And I just think, everything that's going on, it kind of lends into the notion that, are we even going to get an election in 2029? Now, I know that, I can't remember who it is, it's the Labour Party.
No, it's the chair of the Labour Party refused to rule it out. Although I've watched that interview, and I think this is incompetence, not conspiracy, actually. But all the evidence, it's legitimate to say that they are literally undermining democracy with what they are definitely trying to do with local elections. So it's not unreasonable to wonder if we'll end up with a general election. But at the moment, I think that deputy chair was just incompetent.
Yeah, you probably do have a point there, Nick. But again, like I say, it does lend itself to the argument, to the theory, shall we say, that may well be something that could happen. I think, especially when you combine that with this seeming manufacturing of a war with Russia, which would give them precedence to actually cancel a general election. You know, they could quite easily do it if we were to somehow suddenly end up in a war with
absolutely,
Russia.
they could seek emergency powers and do that. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
Do you know? I'm just going to finish our call with tell you something, and I'm going to look it up later. But there is a junior minister for trade called Chris Bryant, right? And he is quoted, and I want to check the quote, but the paraphrase it was effectively saying, when challenged about closing down local elections, he effectively said, and I'll correct myself if I get this wrong later, he said, do you know what? Most people don't even know what's going on in local government and are probably not interested in local elections, so it doesn't matter to them. In other words, what he's really saying is, you're not going to have a say because you're not interested. Now, I'm going to get the exact quote out and read that. Now, I've put that out there. I find that quite sinister if you start using, well, nobody's really interested, we won't bother with an election. Just think about what that really means.
Well, exactly, Nick. So, exactly. As I say, if you combine all these things together, Nick, there's something very, very iffy here. You know, and it's, as I say, it's this slip into authoritarianism that concerns me. And I think Labour is stirring a pot that I don't think they're going to be able to unstir, shall we say, because I can see a situation where you're going to have the left, the right and the centre all out for Labour. You know, and it could get very messy very quickly if they start getting a bit too carried away. I mean, you could argue they're already getting too carried away.
Well, they are. It's a very authoritarian picture that we're in at the moment, which is why I talked about jury trials today. Mark, listen, thanks very much. I want to get a couple of voice messages in before we go to the next break and my next topic, which is going to be about the new leader of the Equalities Commission, which I will be talking about after the break. But first, let's hear from Teeps about no election in 29, since we've been talking about it.
Nick, by all accounts, we're not going to have a general election in 2029. What I'm hearing through 2CTV and people like that is that they will scrap the House of Lords in 2028. That will cause all kinds of disruption politically, and that will be justification for them then cancelling or postponing, perhaps, the 2029 general election. This is a dictatorship we're turning into with Keir Starmer. It's absolutely terrifying.
And I can totally understand why the rationale is, and people are thinking that at all. I'm not yet convinced that they would try and pull out of a general election, but, you know, the evidence so far is not very good. Let's listen to Kev.
Morning, Nick. I do hope you're well. Just referring to the Kemi's doing well in the polls, or the Conservatives. Yeah, if Nigel got 6 questions at PMQs with over 100 MPs behind him cheering, I'm sure he could make Starmer look pretty bad as well. Instead, Reform just gets jeered and shouted down because the Uni Party are petrified of Reform. Reform may have dropped a little bit. Some people may have took all these stupid race allegations seriously. Well, I would possibly say that it's Labour are the most racist party out there, and they would hate that. And it really is racist towards British people, I'd say. What people need to remember with the Conservatives is they're the reason we've got this authoritarian government in right now, them. For 14 years of failure. And don't ever forget, they put this country under a super injunction. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas, he says after a message like that. Listen, I totally get your point about the Conservatives. They gave us Labour. Let's be under no illusion about that. I'm sure Labour would equally say that Kev is completely wrong about them being a racist party. I leave you all to make your own judgments. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about the new head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, because she is frankly pushing credibility in her first few days in the office to an extreme. And I'm going to be talking to Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, after the break.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you for your calls and messages. You can join the conversation 0344 499 1000. As I say, we may even disagree, but we will disagree respectfully. In fact, we haven't disagreed very much at all, but this is your chance to have your say. I may be sitting in the chair, but it's your show. 0344 499 1000. Just quickly to a message. Morning, Nick. Great to see you back. Miss your old show at weekends. About Reform UK. I really want to vote for them, but I'm unable to until they drop their support for hunting with dogs and refusing to ban halal kosher slaughter should they get in government, says Barry. Actually, there's a reason I have a big issue with Reform, is that their fiscal responsibility seems a bit questionable. And I'm not talking about their old manifesto, that's history. I'm talking about the fact that they rushed to support lifting the ban on the 2-child cap on benefits. That, to me, at a time when we have an escalating benefits bill, was madness. I think they did it just to appease for votes. It is something that I think is a huge mistake, socially and fiscally. That's my problem. What's your problem, if you have a problem? But at the moment, they are leading the polls, and I suspect a coalition with the Tories is very much on the cards, and that is not an unreasonable idea at all. 0344 499 1000. Now, the new head of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, as I've been saying, has warned against demonising migrants and said leaving the European Convention on Human Rights would be a mistake. We're already disagreeing. Mary Ann Stevenson said the ECHR underpins key protections for all Britons and argued that portraying migration as a threat harms both new arrivals and existing ethnic minority communities. Interestingly, Nigel Farage was very quick to respond to that and criticising her comments, who said his party, the Reform, prioritised the rights of British people and supports deporting serious foreign criminals. I think it's an extraordinary position for the head of the Equalities Commission to set out so early in her term of office. But I don't pretend to be an expert. Robert Bates, on the other hand, knows a lot more than I do. He's Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Robert, welcome.
Morning, Nick.
It just sits uncomfortably that on the one hand, you've got the new Equalities Commission chief talking about don't demonise migrants and thoughts on criminality and social cohesion, which are tools to demonise them, are unreasonable and shouldn't happen. Yet in the same paper today, you can pick up any story, not least one about an Albanian kingpin who's smuggling migrant crooks, criminals, out of the UK to avoid jail, etc., etc. I mean, come on. What's going on here? Were these wise comments for her to make?
I'm bewildered by why she thought this was in any way appropriate, especially with the way public opinion is moving so clearly to recognise the real and genuine risks that are being posed by an open border policy. We know from data from the Ministry of Justice that foreign nationals are overrepresented in convictions for certain offence types. We do know that when it comes to the small boats crisis, we've seen individuals coming in allegedly with the intent to commit terror attacks. We've seen almost daily attacks being carried out against women and girls up and down the country, tranquil towns being upturned by these heinous attacks. And I really think, the Human Rights Commission here, why aren't they making their first big proclamation in her new role? Why isn't that about the grooming gangs? Why isn't that about the rights of those that have suffered?
And why do you think that is? Because that is the absolutely key point to highlight.
I think it's this individual is stuck in a kind of noughties paradigm where she feels very comfortable talking about demonisation and wanting to have a tranquil conversation on the issue of migration. But frankly, actually, we've seen a lot since then. A lot has changed. We've seen an explosion in the numbers coming legally. We've seen an illegal migration crisis that only seems to be getting worse. And we are seeing, as I said, these attacks now being carried out on an almost daily basis. So I think, unfortunately, what the Labour did by appointing this individual to this role was really dredge up someone whose time of political relevance has long since been and past. And unfortunately, She's wasted no time to seize on the pulpit that she's been given, the taxpayer-funded pulpit, to try and tell us, the majority of this country that are concerned about migration, that we're wrong and that we're bigots and that we're racist. I mean, it's really laughable, and I really don't think this will have any cut through. I can't imagine people are suddenly reassessing their opinion on the migration fiasco because of this
this intervention. But on the one hand, you've got Shabana Mahmood, who is a Home Secretary. I'm going to say this. What she talks about, she has impressed a lot of people, and I've liked listening to her. I don't have the action. There's nothing backing up. We've got record numbers still people coming in illegally into the country. But she's taken a step, and her talking so far, she's saying the right things. Are we effectively lining up for a confrontation between the chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission and the Labour Party Home Secretary, both who were appointed by Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister?
It is interesting, that, isn't it? I can imagine Keir Starmer's been muttering a few four-letter words under his breath this
Do you think
morning.
He does four-letter words? I'm not sure he does.
No, probably not. Probably far too interesting for him to be using. But I think this is the problem that the Labour Party find themselves in. On the one hand, they've got their actual instincts and they've got their Labour backbenchers that are very liberal when it comes to the issue of migration. But on the other side, they've got just the sheer stockpile of statistics and data now, as well as public sentiment. And I think what we have been seeing from this Labour government since they came into office is veering between the two. Of course, we saw Keir Starmer talking about Ireland as strangers, only to then a couple of months later backtrack and say he hadn't read the speech. And Mahmood has come in as Home Secretary with very strong rhetoric, but actually, the plans themselves contain a lot of nuggets that I think actually would appease any concerns that many on the left of the Labour Party and British politics would have about any tough plans, and actually are actually really going to keep the situation quite liberal. I do think, of course, they are tightening on some fronts, but actually, when it comes to safe and legal routes, when it comes to the ability for individuals to have a quicker period to settlement, actually there is still a lot in there that if I were a Labour backbencher, I would kind of think, well, this is pragmatism. She's talking tough, but in reality, there's not too much here that I could object to.
Do you feel, the final question for you, that I'm not sure what the true Labour Party is when it comes to illegal migration particularly? Is it the chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission view on immigration, or is it actually the Shabana Mahmood one? I'm frankly not sure which it is.
I think she probably better represents the views of many on the front bench. I think, this obsession with the ECHR, this desire to be lovey-dovey and nice when talking about very important issues rather than actually tackling the uncomfortable truths head on. I think that really actually is probably more in step with where the Labour Party are. But of course, they are having to try and convince an increasingly sceptical and frustrated electorate that they're on their side.
And if they don't believe it, what chance of success is there? If they truly don't believe, you've got to be really tough and move your political ground to the right to deal with illegal immigration particularly, but they don't believe it, it doesn't bode well, does it?
No, and this is why all we've seen really when it comes to illegal migration is a series of little piecemeal measures here and there. A plan to pop some dinghies in a warehouse in Germany, a plan to have a tough conversation with the French police in Calais. None of it really amounts to anything until you recognise the very basic fact that if you want to stop people coming to the country, you have to deter them. And to do that, you do need a third country deportation scheme, such as the Rwanda plan, but with the added component of leaving the ECHR. And this is why the Labour Party will ultimately fail, because that is something they will never go near, even with their tough rhetoric. They are so wedded to an established order that is so out of touch with actually the modern problems that they will never actually be able to adapt and deal with this increasing crisis. And it is going to be the millstone around their neck for the next 3 years.
Trouble is, Robert, we're in the season of hope and joy, and you've just flattened it brilliantly there. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I hate to be the Grinch, hate to be screwed. But,
Robert Bates, the Grinch of immigration, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. If Labour's heart aren't in it, and I think this chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission is speaking for most of Labour front bench, as Robert said, where it's all about don't demonise migrants and not about what the impact of this immigration is on this country. If that's where Labour's heart is, then forgive me, why should we have any faith in them? 0344 499 1000. Coming up next, something Labour want to ban, and I'm not exactly on the fence on this, but I kind of understand why, is that a social media ban for under 16-year-olds. I want to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about it with a great expert who's Chris McGovern, who's chair for the Campaign for Real Education. He's joining me very shortly after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, Nick. My feeling on the stopping of some jury trials will be just an excuse for woke judges to be able to find criminals not guilty, therefore type of regime they've allegedly tried to escape. Not quite sure about that last bit. I think that's meant to be criminals and immigration linked. We shall see. But now I do want to talk about something here that is troubling me slightly, because I'm trying to work out what the best way of dealing with the problem is, and I'm not sure the Prime Minister's cracked it. The Prime Minister has in the past said he is personally against banning teenagers from social media. But he was happy to keep a close watch on the policy. It sounds like he wants it both ways. And the policy I'm talking about is the one that has been introduced in Australia, only quite recently, and it stops under 16s from using major platforms with fines for companies that fail to enforce it. Now, some ministers want tougher action to tackle online harms. I think that's hard to disagree with anything like that. The government's raised concerns about how such ban will be enforced and is still considering its options. So to help us navigate this one, and I would love your views on this, is the answer to some of the problems created by social media for young people particularly, to ban it. 0344 499 1000. But to help us navigate that, I'm really pleased to welcome Chris McGovern, Chair for the Campaign for Real Education. Lovely to have you back on the show, Chris. In fact, I'm back. You've probably been on loads of times. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
A pleasure. So look, Chris, I'm acutely aware that the social media causes a lot of problems that are anecdotal. I don't have the evidence, but it's hard to go by without a paper being picked up where there's some report or other talking about the impact on how we shape the developments of our kids, their mental health, and things like online harms and so forth. What Australia is trying to do is probably well motivated, and what the Prime Minister sitting on the fence might do is probably well motivated. But is this really the answer to try and ban kids, teenagers from social media?
No, actually, I do support the Australian Prime Minister on this. You know, we're not top of many education league tables, but we are top of the international league table for unhappy children. And that's because our kids are very much addicted to social media. I think, Nick, you could take a lesson from the software bosses, the multi-billionaires living in Silicon Valley. What do they do with their kids? Well, I'll tell you what they do. It's been reported in the Sunday Times. Increasingly, the bosses of the media companies in California, they are sending their own children to schools. They're called Waldorf schools, which ban computers completely. Now, why would the person pushing the drugs ban the drug for his own children? I think you can take your lead from that. So yeah, I support Albanese. He's trying to support parents, by the way. Parents are pulling their hair out over this. They don't know what to do because
I agree.
Their kids go to school. Their friends have got these smartphones. What do they do? If I had my way, I'd go further than Albanese. I would ban the sale of smartphones to children under the age of 18. I would apply the same law to the purchase of smartphones as we apply to the purchase of alcohol. And people will say to me, Chris, oh, you can never enforce that. Well, we can't enforce the law on alcohol, but we still do it. We can't ban murder, but we still ban it. We can't stop it, but we still ban it. So we've got to give support to parents.
Is starting in the schools actually a good place? Schools, for example, they could they not, now, just ban kids from using their phones during school time. They could even take them off and lock them away in a box, I suppose, if they really wanted to. Do we do that in this country? Could you do that in this country?
When I was head teacher some years ago, I was one of the first heads to ban smartphones on school premises. Look, the majority of schools do actually ban smartphones, but the problem is children put the smartphones in their pockets and they're still using them. So although there's about 85% of schools theoretically ban them, the children themselves will say, no, we're still watching hardcore pornography. We're still watching beheadings when they're 11-year-olds. This is a very serious problem. So, yeah, schools, they will say, we restrict the use of smartphones. The kids will tell you, yeah, but we still use them.
There's going to be, when you look at Australia, which is, forgive me, I think it's about 6 months it's been in place, if that. I'm not sure it's even that long.
Yeah, less than that, yeah.
So there'll be two measures, won't they? First of all, is it evidenced after maybe a year that the traffic may be down, that access to it has been limited through smartphones to the sorts of sites that you're talking about. But it's going to take a long time to know if this has had actually any effect on their well-being, and in some cases, some effect on some of the great difficulties that some of them face, particularly mental health challenges and so forth. It's going to take a while for the evidence to be there, isn't it? And should we bring the policy in before there's enough evidence to show if it works?
Well, there's plenty of evidence that addiction to smartphones is damaging. We talk a lot about climate change. We should talk a bit more about mind change, because scientists can actually photograph the brains of young children and show how they've changed because of this addiction to smartphone technology. We can measure it to some extent, but there was a time when I was growing up when smoking was seen, can you really prove it causes lung cancer and so forth? Well, look, I'm not in favour of banning smoking personally, but I would certainly have agreement with that. It's dangerous for your lungs. For years we discuss it. Let me tell you this, in my view, in the campaign for real education, the technology is damaging our children's childhood. We all have evidence in Australia, perhaps. We see the kids out playing. Admittedly, they can still beat us at cricket even with the technology. But look, we need to have a childhood for these children. The parents are saying, look, we need to get the kids out of the...
Chris, can I just interrupt you on that point? Are the parents saying that? I get a number of times, I'm very lucky, I'm a boomer, I can go to restaurants quite a lot, and I do see families in there where they're quite happy to have the kids on their smartphones when they've all gone out for a meal. I mean, you can be in the park and the whole family's sitting down there. Mum's on the smartphone, the kids are on the smartphone. I mean, are the parents doing their bit?
Well, look, some of them aren't. A lot of them feel they can't. The kids are powerful. Adults need to get a grip. The children need leadership, and too many parents, too many adults, too many ministers are afraid of children. Don't be afraid of children. Give children a lead. I remember Mark Twain saying, when I was 16, my dad didn't seem to know a thing. By the time I was 26, he seemed to have learnt a lot. We need to give children a lead. We need to tell children, no, you may not do this. Sometimes, Nick, you've got to say no, and it's for their good. I believe that's okay. And I believe a lot of parents would say, yeah, we would like that too. But I see moms pushing a pram with their phone as well.
Yes.
So look, we're all addicted to this technology. It is look, it's got great benefits. I'm not a Luddite, but there are dangers.
What are the worst outcomes, do you think, as a result of this overuse and compulsion, addictive behaviour to the smartphones in young people? How is it presenting itself?
Well, it's presenting a view of the world which they shouldn't have access to. You know, children should have a childhood. They should have fairy tales to tell them about the dangers. But when 11-year-olds or younger are looking at hardcore stuff, it's going to affect their view of the world. It's also going to mean that they're likely to be bullied. Cyberbullying is rampant across the world, I suppose, because of this technology. Bullying not only of other children, but also of teachers, also of adults. It's a cancer in a way in our society. But of course, it also does a lot of good, so it has to be controlled. We have no problem in our country in terms of lack of access to the internet. What schools need to be doing is reducing it, because we're going into the age of artificial intelligence. We're going to get more and more of this. We need children to be human again, and therefore you've got to take away the phone, because just as we know taking away sweets stops their teeth from rotting. Sometimes the parents have to say no, but they need government support, because the government needs to be able to say to parents, no, it's illegal. And parents can say to the kids, I can't give you a phone, or I can't let you go on social media because it's illegal. For heaven's sake, we've got to support parents. Yes, you're right. Some parents don't, they allow their kids a free run on these phones. But I think you'll find the majority will say, well, it's hopeless. What can they do? What can they do? Support me, please, they're saying. And that's cry for help.
Some parents will say, oh, hang on, Chris, I need to know where the kids are. I need to be in touch with them. Does that mean, would it be realistic to say, well, look, don't give them a smartphone, but give them, I think they call them brick phones, the old-fashioned phone where you could send a text, couldn't get on the internet. Is that a genuine, legitimate concern of parents, that they want to keep in touch with their kids? I get that.
Yeah, well, it's true, and you can give them a brick phone. But when I was a head teacher in North London, one of the problems we had was that because children were carrying phones, they're getting mugged. So where is your child? Well, he's being mugged, or she's being mugged on the tube at the moment. So carrying a phone is not a guarantee of safety. It's probably much, in London at least, and other places, it's probably a guarantee you're going to be mugged, because other people will take their phone off you. There is in the short, yes, I can see the sense of a brick phone. But look, phones are getting taken. There's robbery and there's crime involved with this. It doesn't make children safer. For heaven's sake, we've lived for thousands of years without these phones. I'm not trying to be a Luddite. I'm trying to recognise they have a purpose. But look, we've got to say there are dangers. So 3 cheers for Australia. And I think if only our ministers and our leaders will get off their backside, show a bit of backbone and say, no, we've had enough. We're going to say no. We're going to support parents. Give support to parents. And ultimately, parents, I think most parents would agree with me, and I'm a grandparent.
Well,
there are real dangers here.
We shall find out. I certainly do agree with you. So thanks very much indeed for joining us. That's Chris McGovern, Chairman for the Campaign for Real Education. Take the phones off the kids. Stop them having their smartphones. Is that a way to a better, healthier future for them? 0344 499 1000. Let's go to some messages. There's one or two piling in here. Right, let's say only right-wing Tories, Tory voters, will naturally vote for reform. So those remaining with the Conservatives will be liberal right-of-centre types who will stay with the Tories or move to a left-wing party. That means there is no point, says Rob, forming a coalition, as only the Tories will benefit from it. But it's a numbers game, isn't it, Rob? Because you'll probably find even a left-leaning Conservative is probably more acceptable to you than a left-leaning Labour MP. And it will come down to this choice, by the way. It'll come down to this choice, similar to what we had in the last election, of do you not work with the Tories and face another 5 years of Starmer? Let me just say that again. Another 5 years of Keir Starmer? Or do you get a right-leaning government in where you have some hope that things will be different? Really interested in your views. Keep those coming. 0344 499 1000. Talk. Stop trying to destroy the Reform Party vote by talking of pairing up with the Tories. They, like Labour, should be assigned to the rubbish bin of history by next general election. My worry is the young have been so indoctrinated with green issues they'd vote for a lettuce if told to do so, says Ian in Summit. I don't think I'm trying to destroy the Tory party, the Reform Party, Ian. In fact, I think I've gone out of my way to highlight that they are leading. But even on current polling, they would struggle to form a government in their own right. So I'm kind of saying, is it inevitable that this approach of a partnership of some form between the two, is that something you as members would accept? You, Ian, have said you wouldn't. Others are saying they are. Is the ground shifting? 0344 499 1000. Coming up after the break, we're going to be reviewing again some of the top political stories. I'm really pleased we're going to have James Matheson in to talk us through that. And I'll be picking up on some new points that I know will get you talking, which is precisely what you can do with me, Nick de Bois, sitting in for Julia Hartley-Brewer here on Talk. The number's 0344 499 1000, or tweet me at talkTV or at Nick de Bois.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And welcome back. I'm enjoying it. I hope you have. Thank you for all your messages. I know there's lots going on in our lives in the run-up to Christmas. I'm going to be back here tomorrow between 4 and 7, and back here on Wednesday between 4 and 7 before I disappear on Christmas Eve. And just to run you through things for the rest of Monday, Ian Collins, of course, follows me at 1 till 4. He doesn't leave the studio easily, does he? He'll be in. And then Petri Hoskin from 4 till 7. Alex Phillips, 7 till 10. And then taking us through to 1 o'clock, of course, it's Duncan Barks. Great lineup coming up, but we've got 1 hour together. I'm looking forward to continuing our discussion, and with none other, no better than James Matheson, political commentator. Welcome, James.
Hello, Nick.
How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm a bit worried that you're disappearing on Christmas Eve. Is there something you're not telling us? Have you got another job?
Well, we will be talking about Santa later, and apparently he's too white and a bit colonialist, right? We're going to be talking. But I think I have lost about a stone in weight, so I'm not sure I'd qualify for the job.
I'm more suited to that job than you are right now, Nick.
Oh gosh, don't let us go in, because we're going to be talking about Santa and later on, and I think it'd be unfair to get your wise words of wisdom on the big political issues rather than talking about Santa. Listen, lovely to have you. I just want to canter through some of the issues that I've mentioned before, but also some new ones that I'd like to go through with you. But I think perhaps one of the weirdest things that's happening today is this new head of the Equalities Commission, who's basically come out and said, you're all demonising immigrants, you're all horrible, there's no problems, nothing to worry about, and actually you've got to stop highlighting the social cohesion problems. This is paraphrasing now. Stop talking about the ones that are criminals. This is unfair on all immigrants. Keir Starmer's appointment, but it seems, as people have pointed out to me, a bit out of touch with reality now, isn't it? What's the point of this?
Well, it is this position, when you're in equalities, it's important to take up issues and talk about issues that might not be popular, might not be comfortable for a lot of people to discuss, but are highlighted as an issue. And I'm not going to lie, it won't be no surprise to talkTV viewers that I am of that opinion as well, that there is too much of a focus on this. We talk about it every single day in the media, every single day. And it's not that it's not an important issue, and I understand that it is to many people, but there are other issues as well. And this receives a disproportionate amount of attention, and often the language that comes along with it is very inflammatory, very aggressive. You just need to look at like the headlines in the Daily Mail and the Daily Express to realise that.
But sorry, James, just to ask you on that point, because I know it'll probably wind a few people up, so I just want to dig into that a little bit. The inflammatory headlines are often around someone who has, for example, committed a hideous crime and then is given the right to remain in this country. I think that's not unreasonable to express the anger and frustration there. And aren't you conflating 2 points here, where there's an awful lot of immigrants who have contributed well to this country, done the right thing, but does that stop us being angry, annoyed, irritated, whichever word you use, over those who are just basically abusing the hospitality of this country?
No, I don't think so, because if it was only about that, then we would only see it when that happens. But we just see constant conversation about immigration. I mean, this isn't new, Nick. It's been happening for the last 15 years, at least, in Britain, where we've had headlines about immigrants, about migrants, conflating that with them to be about Islam a lot of the time, and a lot of Islamophobic rhetoric. People will kind of talk hand in hand about migrants and immigrants and Muslims at the same time, which is a very strange conflation that's been deliberate by many people. But, it's a very strange situation to find ourselves in, where, somebody speaks up and says, I think, somebody in an equalities position who knows that line of work says, I think there is a danger here of stepping into something that damages cohesion, damages community relations. And the backlash to that is as we've seen. I think it's disproportionate. I think it's unfair.
But wouldn't she have been better advised to perhaps even advise some sort of balance, some equality, if you like, some balance? I don't think
there is a balance at the moment. Well, I think there is an imbalance. And I think it's in the direction of anti-immigration. I think that seems to be the norm in our media language.
But okay, but she's not just talking about the media language, although that's an important part of her narrative and the thing that she's talking about. She's talking about how we conduct ourselves as well. And yes, of course, that will include media. But I guess what I was getting at, and phrasing rather badly, in that same speech, where she's literally landed on one side of a fence, if you like, should she not have tried to bridge that by pointing out about the equalities and rights of, for example, the victims of grooming gangs, where she says, I acknowledge there are problems. There have been some horrific problems, horrific examples. She said, but that is then, she might have gone on to say, not a reason to demonise everyone.
Well, I think as soon as you bring up grooming gangs and you bring them into the equation, you're instantly linking them with immigration.
Well, that's because that is hugely topical, James.
But I think that lets people off the hook, Nick. I think it really does. I think it lets the individuals off the hook. It gives them some kind of excuse that there's some cultural issue here that causes men to abuse women and cause violence against women and girls. And there isn't. No, there simply isn't. We see this issue in every country on Earth, and we see it in every planet, across the planet as a whole.
But if you have a culture that does treat women very differently, James, and actually has contempt for many women, but expects them, does not look at our liberal society, the way we dress. Well, I'm talking about the way we dress, the way we go out.
I mean, if we look at the
you're detracting me, James. Hang on.
If we look at the rape figures and the statistics, Nick, we are not this bastion of safety for women.
No, and I'm not saying we are. I totally accept your argument. There's many wicked people who are not immigrants, right? I get that. Okay, I do get that. The point I'm making to you is that if you said that this is not a cultural issue on grooming gangs, okay? But in fact, is it not fair to say that people who come to this country come with different cultures, different values, different representation, different views on women and how they should conduct themselves and behave? We know that, right? So surely that is a difference of a cultural value, and that can breed a contempt, and a dangerous contempt, for how people may treat and respect young women. That's not a good thing, is it?
I just don't believe it, because many of these grooming gangs, right, whilst we talk about them coming from the likes of Pakistani communities, right, and that's the conversation, that's discussion around areas like Rotherham and all the rest of it. Now, when we talk about that, we talk about the Pakistani communities because many of those men have been born here, but they're just from a Pakistani community. They're second or even third generation immigrants. They're British citizens, Nick. Like, what are we going to do about that? That's on us. They've been raised in this country. They've come up through this country, and they are doing that, and they're committing those crimes. It's not the fault of Pakistan.
But, well, hang on. We're always talking about communities in this country, which I think in a way is divisive sometimes. But within that community, then, are those same communities not actually trying to protect people?
They went to British schools. They were integrated to the British state system. They were integrated. What's the issue? If you're born in this country, you're British, and if you live in this country, and you know they're living their life in this country. Yes, they might be.
So how do you explain how do you explain then those illegal immigrants who are applying for deportation, who have committed crimes, hideous crimes against women as well, but hideous crimes, and actually try and stay in this country? All right, using human rights laws when they have absolutely no respect for our values, have broken the law, and yet want to try and stay here and speak and often espouse hatred against this country. Well, surely that is not something you would defend.
No, but I don't take the point about values. My issue here isn't values-based. If you're a criminal, if you're somebody who commits a crime, especially a crime of violence and sexual violence against women and girls, you need to be deported from this country, understandably and undoubtedly. Especially if would
you support getting rid of the European Convention on Human Rights so we can do that?
No, I think there need to be changes to it, but I think you change these things from within, and the government needs to do that. And I do see, I mean, there are some positive noises. I do not like Shabana Mahmood's rhetoric at all. I think she's echoing the likes of Nigel Farage in what she's doing, but there are some things that she is going after in certain articles in the ECHR which need to be reformed. They do, so that these challenges can be made. But listen, if you find yourself sitting opposite to a human rights lawyer, you have to ask yourself why. There are human rights. Everybody has human rights. We don't like it. We don't like it when criminals are given human rights and all the rest of it.
So why do we need an ECHR then? I mean, Australia doesn't have it. America doesn't have it. They're big on civil rights.
Australia and America aren't the best examples when it comes to human rights.
I think they are. I think they are. No. Why does Europe need a European Convention on Human Rights when the rest of the world, the liberal Western democracies, that's why I'm talking about countries like Australia and America, don't need it?
Less than 100 years ago, Nick, we were killing each other in Europe. And there was a genocide that killed 6 million Jews. These were why these conventions were set up, to stop things like that happening. And
yeah, but when they were written all those years ago, James, they didn't have, for example, what they've got now. How things have moved on. There's things in the European Convention Human Rights orbit that were never contemplated back in 1947 or 8, whenever it was.
It's developed as challenges have developed. For example, issues like modern slavery that didn't exist then. So there are things that need to be changed. Of course, there are, and there are things that need to be maintained. But I do not believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and unfortunately the people who are doing so, and I would advise your viewers to look very carefully at the politicians who are advocating for that, because I don't know if they're going to uphold your human rights as well.
Okay, listen, we can't spend all of this on that subject as much as I would like to do it. I think it's the first time you and I have chatted, actually, so I did enjoy that. Can we now talk about Wes Streeting, who's meant to be sorting out the doctors, and abjectly failing to sort out the doctors, having dished out loads of cash to them. They're back on strike. He's busy wandering the woods and telling us all about joining a customs union, which in my opinion is the worst of all options, even if you were to think it's a good idea to get closer to the European Union. But, why isn't he doing the day job? Why is he setting out his stall to be leader of the party?
Because we're talking about it now, Nick. That's why. And that's what's important to Wes Streeting. So he knows that he says this and he gets coverage. And his name's in the press, right? And he doesn't want his name to be in the press right now for his day job because he's doing a very bad job at it and he's not bringing a closure to that negotiation that he said he would. It's been a complete mess. That was the thing he was lauding when he first came into the post, was how he'd managed to successfully bring an end to the strikes and managed to kind of get around the table with the BMA and sort this out. That's completely fallen apart now. He doesn't want anybody to be looking at that. So what's he doing? He's doing what's called a dead cat strategy in politics. People will remember this from the Boris Johnson era. What you do is you got a bad story out in the press, you float a different bad story.
Oh, hang on. It was long before Boris Johnson.
Yeah. Boris was
Linton
Crosby.
Linton Crosby introduced that, and that was back in David Cameron's day.
It's the Crosby, but I mean, Boris Johnson and Linton Crosby.
But seriously, it's quite risky, isn't it? Because, look, OK, funny enough, I say this quite openly, I like Wes Street's style of politics. He's a very good communicator. He does say things that other people wouldn't say, and that's refreshing. A bit of a Nigel Farage thing, if you like, in that sense. I'm sure he won't like the comparison there. But my point is that, notwithstanding that, the bottom line is he's health secretary. He's got a big mess on his plate. What do you think public make of the fact that he, and let's be honest, others, are busy lining up to kick Keir Starmer out of office and grab the top job?
The thing what they always think of these things, Nick, and that's that politicians are all the same. And unfortunately, that it just leads you to believe that. And you look at it and, you and I know they're not. Of course, there are differences between people, as there are between everyone. But when you look at this, you think, oh, for God's sake, the second there's an opportunity to try and get yourself further ahead, to try and, stab your allies in the back, you're at it. It feels Govian. It feels like a Michael Gove move. It feels like one of these things. And at the end of the day...
I'm sorry, they're not in Michael Gove's league.
No. I mean, nobody's in Michael Gove.
I know Michael Gove, and Wes Streeting is no Michael Gove.
If Wes Streeting was doing a Michael Gove, he'd be in Aberdeen right now.
We're being a bit frivolous, but I suppose it's Christmas. Can I just move us on? Because Labour are now going back to sort of almost the Blairite stuff, which he kind of regretted in terms of their plans to ban trail hunts under Labour's new Daily Mail war on the countryside. Something we can agree on probably is their plan to deal with puppy farms, which I'm okay with. I see the sense of that. They're pretty horrible stuff,
Yeah, I mean, but it's funny, isn't it, that the thing we'd agree on is not hurting puppies. I mean, that's like bread and butter, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but fair, I'm not seeking election, right? OK. But this is kind of, it's almost like Labour Party want to pick off another group to annoy, and it's back to the countryside now. They've done the farmers, they've stitched them up. We did the pensioners when we decided to make them freeze for a year or two. We're just now we're on to pubs, we're on to cafe owners, and today, here's another one for you. We're going to go after the countryside lovers. I mean, what do you make of all of this?
Absolute nonsense, Nick. Countryside lovers do not chase animals around with
I think you'll find quite a few do, actually.
No,
that's why we have hunts and things like that.
I grew up in the most rural county in England, in Northumberland, right?
A beautiful county, I hasten to add. I go on holiday there.
I speak up about rural poverty all the time because I know it, because we lived in farm lettings. I know tenant farmers.
And how's banning trail hunting going to help rural poverty?
Because it is completely overrepresented as a countryside issue by the lobbies that do so. Unfortunately, it's not an issue. Most people, even if you go to the countryside, most people do not agree with it because they know what's happening. You just need to go and see them. I mean, I will not mention the hunts by name, but I know them back where I'm from in Northumberland. And I mean, I know exactly what they do because the people I went to school with who partake in them brag regularly about how they're hunting foxes and other animals with dogs, which is illegal, but they're doing so under the guise of trail hunting. Ban trail hunting. There is no need for it whatsoever.
James, how interesting is this? I'm going to leave you with one thought because I had such a long list to get through with you very quickly. Tories and reform. The right wing seal a majority and get into government because they agree to work together at the time. The left are sent packing. Music to some people's ears, the thought of an early Christmas present. In all seriousness, what is your view on Tories and reform? working together as the best prospect for the right returning to power?
I mean, electorally, it makes complete sense. Of course it does. Although it's not, it's not in my best interest to try and advocate for that, of course. But I do think when it comes to the Tories and Reform getting along, we're already starting to see Reform getting along with themselves, to be honest.
You can talk well, not you. Labour can talk. They're struggling. I get that.
I'm not even a member of the Labour Party anymore because of that reason. So I agree with you. However, I would say that Nigel Farage being returned to power as Prime Minister, I don't know if it's in Nigel Farage's best interests. I'll put it that way.
James, I really enjoyed that. We have never spoken before, I don't think. And if we have, I apologise. I've been away for a long time. Thank you very much for joining us. Happy Christmas to you. And long may the right wing return soon, so I can watch James get all cross with me if I'm back on air at some point doing that. It was really kind of him to join us on that. What are your thoughts? A few messages coming in. I am fuming. James is absolutely what is wrong with this country, making excuses for the grooming gangs by saying they're British. They may technically be I can't see that. Can't be bothered to get off the sofa, says it all. He is normalising abusing women, which in the climate we live in is very dangerous, says Gail. I don't think he was normalising that. He was trying to disassociate it with cultural differences, and I tried to hold him to account on that one. We'll come back to more messages there. I can see people yelling at me thinking we should be going to the break, but I'm going to very quickly get a view on pubs from Jason. He's got a voice message.
Morning, Jason from Whitby. My two penneth on the pubs and Rachel Thieves being banned. The lot should be banned. MPs past and present. They've spent 20 years trying to destroy the great British pub, our community. They've said, bad for your health, put strain on the NHS, bad for policing, put strain on the policing. They've done everything they can to destroy the British pub, and they're still at it because they'd rather have us sat at home like robots. Happy Christmas, everybody.
Jason, I do love the way in your voice messages you're giving a terribly downbeat message, which is beautifully put, by the way, and then say Happy Christmas. Well, one thing we can agree on, Jason, and frankly, I do understand what you're saying on pubs. Let's go down the pub. Come on. Let's support our pubs. You know, they need it. And our cafes and our restaurants. We had Kate from Chair of Hospitality, Kate Nichols, on telling us how damaging Labour's moves have been. Absolutely borderline criminal what they've been doing. Right, more of your calls, more of your messages coming up after this.
UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up shortly at 1 o'clock, it's the great Ian Collins. After Ian Collins, we'll be going to, who are we going to? Petri Hoskin, of course, and then from 7 till 10, Alex Phillips. And closing off the evening will be Duncan Bartz at 10 to 1. But now let's go straight to your calls and your messages. Ian, a voice message.
Hi, Ian here from Manchester. Stevenson's quite correct. Immigrants are demonised in this country, especially by reform, and it's all a diversion from the main problems that exist in our country as a whole.
Do you agree with Ian? 0344 499 1000 that demonising migrants is a deliberate tactic of reform, he says, and it's just a diversion from other problems. 0344 499 1000, or you can answer by voice message on the same number. Let's go to John in Cheshire. John, hello.
Hello, Nick. How are you?
I'm very well. Hope you're enjoying the show. Thank you for listening.
I am indeed, certainly. Good. It's just regarding these fears that people are expressing that the Labour Party might try and delay the next general election.
Yes.
I don't think they will.
Okay.
Because if 80% of the population want them gone, you'd have the biggest demonstrations in British history. And why would the army... Because basically, they get to the end of the 5-year term, that's it, the government's dissolved.
Well, I know by law it's a maximum 5-year term, and I should know the answer to this, given I was an MP once. But I still think technically the King has to dissolve Parliament. So it's also true. I wonder if they overran 5 years without the consent of the people, whether the King would then make a big political move and dissolve Parliament. There's a thought.
Well, it's not the King's job to do that because it's actually engaged in the law. But I think the main thing is, as well, is so massive demonstrations, possibly 80% of the
Yeah, there would be. Huge. I'd be
the
demonstrating.
Yeah. Why would they've then got to rely on the army and the police to obey the orders of a government that 80% of the people feel is illegal, and I don't see them doing that. There's a possibility you might have a general and a couple of companies of infantry marching into the House of Commons.
Now, last
for any good you may have done in the name of God, go.
I think the last person who did that was Oliver Cromwell, wasn't it? And he was a member of Parliament for Huntingdon, which then produced the Prime Minister about 400 years later. Yeah. So there you go. Look, I don't yet take too seriously the idea, because I know that Labour will not hold the next general election, because I know it's started to be talked about because of the deputy chair of Labour basically saying, refusing to rule out cancelling the election. This was incompetence. I'm pretty convinced of it. However, I take very seriously the threat to the very threat to democracy that's already underway, which is through the council elections. And I think that that's a bad thing. Listen, John, thank you for your contribution on that. Let's go to Georgina in London.
Hello, Nick.
Hi.
Hi, and happy Christmas to you. I mean, I'm ringing about the chief of the ECHR. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't think that illegal migration is a threat, as he probably lives in a beautiful, leafy suburb where he doesn't have to deal with the horrendous aftermath of these culturally medieval people permeating his very existence. He doesn't have to deal with his daughter being dragged into a hedge to be savagely abused. He doesn't have to deal with being harassed or followed when he goes to the shops or for an evening out. He doesn't have men strolling into his garden whilst his children are playing, or have them hanging around his local schools ogling and taking pictures of the children as they play. The crime due to these illegal migrants, Nick, is being hushed up and swept under the carpet so as to
hang on, Georgina.
reprisals.
Do you think it's been hushed up? Because on the one hand, I had someone, I think it's James Matheson, was saying how awful it is people are being demonised. And I said, well, is it demonisation when we're highlighting these things in the press? Is it being covered up?
No, hang on. The mainstream media does not highlight these things in the press. And if the fits, wear it. These people are causing untold problems within our country. Our children and our women.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that, but I do think that, in fairness, I think, for example, much criticised all the time, the Daily Mail are often highlighting immigrants, often illegal immigrants, who've come to this country, committed crimes, and then get the right to stay through some mad judge in a tribunal. So I'm not. The only thing I'm really disagreeing with is the idea that it is being covered up. I think the fact that, you know, we talk about it a lot, I think that's a great thing.
Exactly. Well, social media is the ones that have brought this to light, because mainstream media, when it was all kicking off, wasn't highlighting the problems. They were saying someone has been arrested. They weren't saying their cultural background, where they'd come from, if they'd come over on a boat. It was all being hushed up, and nobody
That was being the case. We know that, particularly over what happened in Liverpool.
Yeah. Well, the crime due to these illegal migrants, Nick, is being hushed up and swept under the carpet. Like I've said before, Shabab Mahmood needs to have the political will to stop this tsunami of illegal migrants. But from what I can see, she's having no effect on the numbers of
Well, it's interesting. You see, I think she's talking the right language, but no action. Now, do you have any hope that, particularly as Keir Starmer becomes weaker and weaker, that we might see some action? I'm not convinced, because I'm not sure they believe what they're saying.
Well, you've got, like I've just said, you've got to have the political will to make a change, and they haven't. They don't know where to start. You know, not only have we got to deal with the dangers that these people present, we're also having to deal with the catastrophic economic aftermath of paying to keep them here. This, to me, Nick, is a road to economic ruin. We're financially unable to maintain this gargantuan financial burden, and we're in no position to be benevolent. We cannot even afford to look after our own citizens, for goodness sake, never mind waifs and strays from third world backwaters. Charity must begin at home, Nick. We need to start by leaving the ECHR, and then we can start to put our own policies in place.
Georgina?
Stop!
Georgina, I'm only interrupting for time. You are on fire, and I'm back tomorrow between 4 and 7 and the next day. I hope to hear from you. My goodness, that was Georgina on fire from London there. Coming up, we have to go and discuss with our great Rupert Bell the latest shenanigans that's going on with the Royals and Epstein. And stay tuned to discuss, is Father Christmas too white? 0344 499 1000. I didn't say that. A museum in Brighton said that. Join me for more talk. 1 o'clock, you've got Ian Collins coming up. But until then, we have 30 minutes to keep the conversation as robust and as, shall we say, on fire as Georgina was just then.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Yes, is Father Christmas too white? We'll be coming on to that, to discuss that. I'd love to know your views on what this museum in Brighton has been saying. I think they came up. Also, he should be working alongside the elves in the age of equality, was one of them. There should be more recognition of Mother Claus. Oh yeah, this is the one, isn't it? That they should, Father Christmas should not be making judgments about who's been naughty and who's being nice. Get a grip, people. Goodness sake. Now, speaking of getting a grip, our royal family, and you all know me, I'm a huge fan of the royal family, but it just seems that we're always discussing negatives around them. So I'm going to try, at the end of this chat with our great talk correspondent, royal correspondent Rupert Bell, to find something positive to say. Rupert, welcome.
Good afternoon, Nick. Yes, lovely to be chatting to you.
You're looking
just
very
before Christmas.
dapper. Are you about to go to the palace for a cup of tea or a bit of lunch?
No, well, I'm at the London International Horse Show. I'm at the Excel. I'm in a rather bleak conference room
It's
here.
brilliant, though, isn't it? It's a great show. You see.
Yeah, just over my shoulder is the main arena, full of horses and full of lots of people enjoying equestrian entertainment as rural life comes to London and without a tractor in sight. So everyone having a great time.
Well, yes, well, thank goodness we still have some horses and we haven't lost the countryside completely and the farmers aren't there in striking, bless them. More to the harvest. Let's talk royal families. So what have I got in front of me here? Because I hope you have as well. Puppet Andrew Mountbatten Windsor used to grope Virginia Guthrie, caught on camera in background of Epstein files. It just goes on and on and on. When can we stop talking about this?
Until they stop releasing the Epstein files, I think. I occasionally, just the surrounding it, he does seem to be the sort of, people refer to it as the low-hanging fruit, because his indiscretions or alleged indiscretions are all out there.
That's also entirely inappropriate, given the photographs and things, by the way, young man.
But everything is out there. And so whereas we're seeing all these heavily redacted statements and files, which is causing a bit of a political hoo-ha in America, and probably quite rightly so, but for Andrew, these latest photographs of him draped over a group of women, and by all accounts, and Sandringham as well in 2000 when he held a shooting party, which actually, if you remember back to the Mateless interview, he referred to, well, he invited Ghislaine Maxwell, and Epstein was just his plus one. But by all accounts, there was a lot of, Richard Jobson's book, sort of alleging all sorts of sort of things were going on during that shooting party that certainly seemed way out of line as to what would normally be going on at Sandringham.
No, they are way out of line. I think I'm looking at this from a slightly different point, because actually I've no problem with all the Epstein files being released, because it's showing the full horror of what was going on, and particularly, this trail of trafficking of abuse and the victims, and I'm sure the victims are pleased in a way because they're protecting their identities. But I come back to this, to me there is horror from a number of different people, and we are focusing on the former Prince Andrew. I think there's no lower he can get, is there? I just wonder, are people only going to be happy if he tops himself?
No, well, I mean, good heaven forfend it.
Well, exactly, but it makes me feel that is what we are going to do now. He is so low. The man's out of our lives, thank God. We're not paying for him. He's disgraced, rightly so, deservedly so, and yet we carry on with him and not talking about Bill Clinton and people like this.
Well, this is my point, that he does seem to be the easy person to pop at. Now, he's never actually said that he's done anything wrong. He's always denied all these allegations against him, and that is also part of the problem. And then, of course, he did pay up money as well. So he's left himself in this, back against the wall, in the sense that he's got nowhere else to go. But these Epstein files, it's just increasingly, even what we're seeing now, it looks incredibly seedy, nasty, and these poor women who seem to have been trafficked and or whatever was going on. I mean, even in this latest series of what you read, it's absolutely horrendous and despicable. Yet all these billionaires, millionaires seem to be dancing at the court of Jeffrey Epstein. He was a very clever man, the way he was able to manipulate people. He got himself with all rich people as he was a financier, and he created this absolute horror show. And it is only getting worse. And President Trump doesn't seem to know what to do. One minute he wants them all released. The whole thing is unseemly. And Andrew, while he is definitely at the heart of this story, is, in terms of the British perspective of this story, the easy person to pop at. But it's all his own fault. You can't actually say and apologize for him. He has created this ever since that interview where he was all his statements the holes were picked straight away and led to him now sounding as if he's going to have he will be on his own in Royal Lodge at Christmas, because it sounds like his daughter's going somewhere else.
Well, I was going to ask you about this. It's been reported that Princess Beatrice snubs her disgraced father and is spending Christmas far away from him. Is it a snub, or is she just wants to get away?
Well, I think she's sort of, as they might say, between a rock and a hard place, because she doesn't want to necessarily upset her father by then going, she still has a great deal of affection for him, but her patience must be tested. But then if she goes to Sandringham, then it will sort of maybe give the appearance that she's now siding with the rest of the royal family and deserting her father. So it probably is easier for her to go and have this skiing holiday, which I believe she's going on, and just have some fun in the Alps. And it avoids, excuse me, the complication. When you go to a horse show, Nick, you always come away with a bit of a lurgy, because and I've got the London International Horse Show lurgy, for which I apologise. But anyway, we digress. But so I see why Beatrice probably doesn't want to be part of the Sandringham Christmas. But just for Andrew, as you say, it's going to be a lonely Christmas. But you have to also say his attitude, his arrogance, has led him to being the pariah and the black sheep.
You're right. His arrogance is all too evident, and it's not a question of feeling sorry for Andrew. I think it's a question of saying, we have this focus on Andrew, and I'm thinking there's some pretty influential other figures in there who really are all getting away with some of the horrors that went on, whilst we focus on Andrew, who I don't think can get any lower. Where does it leave the king? He can't do anything else now, can he? The king has just got to pretend he doesn't exist, really, hasn't he?
Yes, and again, this is why Sandringham for Christmas, we'll see, I assume we'll see them going to church, but there won't be the sideshow story of what's going on. Is Andrew, I don't think he was seen last year, but again, he was there perhaps, but he probably had to be shunted in the back door to get into the church. So we won't have that soap opera element. And you actually want to give, for the king, he probably just wants a break, because we have to remember he's still going through his cancer treatment. Okay, there is positive signs, but his cancer treatment hasn't stopped. It's just been lessened, I believe. So he's still got his own health worries, and he probably just wants to enjoy Christmas with his family in Sandringham and get on with it, without perennial distractions of what his brother and his son are getting up to.
And particularly Sandringham, which of course is where some of these ghastly photos have come from.
Absolutely. And you think, and this was back in 2000, maybe if, the shooting season runs from sort of November through to the end of January, and it might have been November, just probably a few weeks before they all gathered at Sandringham, which was where the Queen always celebrated Christmas. So again, just eye-watering, the reports of what may have gone on at that party. So you just feel that Andrew has created an absolute horror show for the rest of the Ram, who must be just rolling their eyes in absolute frustration. And every time they pick up a paper, you then read something new. And this Epstein files, with the fact that some of it's redacted, and whatever goes on within the American political system, there may be even some of these things may become unredacted, so we may find out more. It's not going away as far as American politics is concerned, because President Trump seems to 1 minute say yes and then say no. But That tends to be his modus operandi. So hopefully, the victims of this will get due reward. And let's remember, it's about the victims, not, and it shouldn't be, about safeguarding a few
Yes, and many of them
billionaires.
have said they are pleased that this is coming out. Listen, Rupert, get back to the horses. Have a great evening. It's a fantastic show, and I'm sure we'll be talking again in the next few days. Lovely to hear from Rupert Bell there on the latest around the royal family. He's a busy man because that family just seems to go from being in the news for one day for all the wrong reasons, and understandably so. OK, we're going to get to more of your calls. I'm going to read out some of your messages, and we're going to be asking that question that Brighton Museum wants to ask us about. I must get the full name of the museum. Apparently they are somewhat concerned that Father Christmas is too white. 03444 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just said earlier that I was talking about this junior minister, Chris Bryant, who was talking about the local elections. And if you read it, I just want to clarify the paraphrasing that I'm using on what he was saying. He basically was defending the right, saying, we are going to cancel elections because if we didn't, we'd have another election in a year or maybe 2 years later. And if you ask most people, they'd say, oh, that's nonsensical. But what it's really underlying it is when you look at a paragraph like this, if you ask people, do you want to have another round of elections next year for people who will effectively only be in charge of a local authority for a single year? Or would you prefer us to delay those elections so that you're just electing for a new local authority, which will be a unitary thing, that's a technical thing? He says, I think, to be honest, that most ordinary people in the country would go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Why would you just elect people for a year? That seems daft. He's basically saying, you vote for people to have your say, but we've decided, actually, you can't have your say about us. And we're going to delay things to delay you having your say. You know, if this government can't even organise the reform of local election to a timetable that suits the pillars of democracy, which is actually elections, then I'm not surprised people think something is very fishy. If a politician says they want to help you have your say and then stops you having an election, well, it's a bit strange, really, isn't it? Because that, I've paraphrased exactly, is what is underlying those comments. Now, Father Christmas has become the focus of a culture war after Brighton and Hove Museum said the festive figure is too white and should be decolonised. The museum argued Santa's traditional naughty and nice role reinforces Western ideas of power and authority, suggesting it casts him as a global moral judge. Just think about that. We're talking about Father Christmas. Montgomery Toms, freedom campaigner, joins me now. Montgomery.
Hi there, thank you for having me on.
What do you make of this intervention?
I just think it's insane. I mean, I remember when I was in education how obsessed, this was only a few years ago, my history teacher was with going on and on and on about how bad the white man is, the history of slavery, constantly demonising Britain ultimately and criticising everything about us and putting it down based on the colour of our skin. And I think that actually by not taking the Martin Luther King approach, which is based on the content of their character, not the colour of their skin, you're actually creating more division, you're actually creating more racism. And I'm noticing that even on the right, where obviously there's a very vital discussion around kind of migration, what that means, and having that conversation, that because the left and museums and the education system are constantly going on about skin colour, it's starting to drift over to our direction too. And we're getting into this conflict around the colour of people's skin rather than the more nuanced, important discussion around migration and those kind of identity issues. And I'm just thinking at this point, you know, when is this going to stop? I thought we were in a period of time where it's kind of like woke is dead. I don't think it is dead, and I think that we've got a lot of work to do.
Well,
actually.
I think it's important how we react to this sort of rebellion of the woke who are trying to fight back in Brighton. I mean, it strikes me that they've literally missed the point, because Father Christmas is for kids. I don't think kids are wondering if he needs to be working with elves, we should see more of Mother Christmas, or if he's too white. I really don't. And I just think this is a bizarre engagement level. But why, if you think woke is reasserting itself, why would it want to open itself to so much ridicule? Because surely the normal bloke who goes down a pub, if it's still open, right, and he's talking, this conversation must seem like from a parallel universe. That's why I think woke might be hopefully defeated. Am I being too hopeful?
Well, no, maybe you're taking the more optimistic approach. I mean, I was in Brighton not long ago during Pride Month. I took a trip down there, and Brighton is a special case, in fairness. If anyone does visit Brighton, it is the land of woke. And you can call it kind of left-wing, or I don't even call it left-wing at this point. I think it's beyond that. And it
has very nice lanes, though, which you can go down for shopping. I would say that in defence of Brighton.
Yeah, and it's got a good seafront, I suppose. But apart from that, when it comes to engaging with people, because I was there to discuss with people Pride Month, if you were to expand this to the local man in the pub there about how a local museum has made this point, I would actually put it to you that they would probably think that's quite a rational perspective. But you raise actually something even more important, is the fact that this is being pushed onto young people and children, and it's introducing at such a young age these mature concepts of skin colour. Well, I don't know about you, but when I was 5, 6, 7, do you know what? Pretty much my entire life, especially when I was young, I wasn't thinking about these things. When I look at a man, I don't look at a black man or a white man. I look at a man. And when I go to, because I go to a lot of demonstrations, and I was at a pro-Palestine demonstration a couple months ago, and I was having a conversation and having a debate with someone, and they said, I am a woman of colour. I was like, no, I don't look at you like that. You are just a woman to me. I don't identify your skin colour with your personality and who you are. And constantly asserting that on their side, looking at white people and how we've got to demonise our history, it creates that division. And it's like Morgan Freeman famously said, how do you stop racism? You just stop talking about it. Stop making it a problem.
Have they bitten off too much that they can chew here in Brighton, having a pop at Father Christmas? I mean, and I'm not being frivolous here. I know I might sound as if I have been, but I mean, it is so mind-bogglingly baffling that they would want to pick on Father Christmas. These people are either in an industry that is woke-based and terrified of losing their future income, that they have to try and get talked about, which they've successfully done. But it just strikes me that they've bitten off more than they can chew. We're going to win this, aren't we? It's going to be put in the dustbin, isn't it?
100% we're going to win. I have no. It's just it's a whether we believe we've won already or whether we've got a few more years to go. And I'd say we've got a few more years to go. I mean, the thing is, they are captured. It's a cult at this point. It's obsessive. It's the constant need to drive and make things more extreme and be more controversial and make even grander statements, and now taking on Father Christmas, for goodness sake. It is, at this point, laughable. When I saw this article, when it was sent over to me, my reaction, honestly, I just burst out laughing.
Well, I didn't believe it. I mean, I seriously didn't believe it. I said, I want a second source on this. No one is this stupid as the people who wrote this blog, who wrote such a stupid blog.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, but it's also sinister because somebody has sat there and genuinely thought this. And I'm sure that there's an element of kind of pressure of everyone just going along with it within the museum. But there is a group of people or an individual somewhere within in a museum genuinely asserting the idea that Father Christmas being white is going to be going to be.
So looking ahead to 26, more woke or less woke?
I think we're gonna. It's very interesting. I mean, when for example, the ruling came that there's only two sexes, we actually saw a massive spike in people reacting to that. And people thought, oh, well, this is the end of it. And what we've instead seen is more demonstrations, more people putting pride flags in their windows as a reaction to reality. But I think I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I know that sounds quite depressing, but my generation, you know, I'm 20, and when I was in university, and I was only there for a short amount of time, 3 weeks actually, because I got strong-armed out because I refused to go along with all the cronies.
I'd love to know which university you were at, because you did well to survive that.
It was London College of Communications, and interestingly, it's in Elephant Castle. It's a big colourful building on the corner. But interestingly, one of the things they told me when I was at university is they said, you need to check your privilege. This is one of the core values of the institution. They said, because you're white, this is word for word, you assert a dominance hierarchy amongst people who are black or mixed race. Meaning, if I speak to someone of colour, I need to basically check my privilege and recognise the fact I'm white, just in case it offends or upsets them. This is how captured they are. So the reason I'm more pessimistic than you, or you know, and maybe I should be more optimistic, but it's because this wasn't that long ago, and I can tell you that my generation is still locked in this mindset.
Well, we'll have you back next Christmas. Find out, you know, what next. What next is going to be organised. But maybe it'll take the Supreme Court to decide if Father Christmas is too white or not. Montgomery Tom's Freedom Campaigner, thanks so much. Have a happy Christmas. Coming up will be Ian Collins. I've had a great time, I must say, coming back out of retirement with my wheelchair tucked in here, and I'll be back, by the way, between 4 and 7 tomorrow. But before that, let's get ready for my mentor, who... you see, you laughing, and I'm saying you're my mentor. I have been following you and listening to you for years.
No, I know, Nick.
And
you said it before.
I've always seen. Look. My hand's in the same place as you. If they had two cameras on us, people would be
doing mirroring.
Although I think I'm better dressed than you.
I think you are better dressed.
I just
you always scrub up rather well. It's lovely to see you again.
Well, it's great to be here.
But then the news today. I don't know whether, as a Conservative, assuming you are still a Conservative, whether it perturbs you, this Tory reform thing.
It's going to happen.
Is it? It's going to happen.
It's got to happen because
of the left problem.
The problem is, I'm not convinced Tories and reform could actually genuinely stick together as long as a united Labour Party has stuck together, right, which is now falling apart.
When you look at the kind of personalities.
Just look at the egos.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. I mean, is Nigel Farage and Kemi going to sit down and break bread? What job does she do? He becomes the leader, she becomes the what? Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, exactly.
Kind of Nick Clegg sort of role.
And of course, you've got ex-Conservatives in the Tory party, and they'll all be smug and annoying to the Tories.
Kruger's going to want a prime gig,
so it's like having Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and who else has got a big ego in there. Oh, maybe Nigel Farage, because he does have an ego. Let's be honest. That's what's driven him.
And in a way, that is what drives a lot of good politicians. Yeah. But when you first entered politics, I mean, did you think this would be where it would end up?
I was always suspicious the two-party dominance would end. Yeah. Because we carried on disappointing people. Even I was disappointed as an MP with some of the things Cameron was doing. Yeah. So, and that was back in like 15. Yeah. So 14, 15. So I'm not
your bill
surprised
to bring back hanging went nowhere, didn't it? Didn't happen, by the way, in case newspapers.
Yes, I know. Well, you know, and it can't happen now under the ECHR.
Hansard will be my guiding light on this.
Ian Commons.